But thanks for coming on the show, man.
Pleasure, man.
We've known each other for several years, so honored to have you on the show. I like what you're doing online, and I see where your business has gone. So, I guess for the audience, if you could just walk us through, how did you become, or how did you get into the fitness industry, and what were some of your early childhood motivations to get in there?
I'm gonna try to keep this short. It's gonna be a long story, man. Basketball was for sure the catalyst, because from when I was probably, let's say like 8, 9 years old, I'd go to basketball camps. I think it's a little bit of a cop-out to say I fell in love with it. I eventually did. This is I like to share this story because people think about, there's this thing called a passion hypothesis, right? Like, I'm going to do something and I'm going to be passionate about it, and that's what, it's going to hit me, and that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life type of thing. But it's not. Like, I was scrawny, I was short, I didn't get picked, I wasn't good, so I just had a chip on my shoulder. I felt very insecure. And when we'd go to these camps too, as in Slovenia, you got quite a few tall kids.
Right.
If you looked at me, you wouldn't go like, that guy for sure is a basketball player. And it just made me like practice, right? But the practice came from a place of like, I'll show them, chip on my shoulder.
Right.
I was the youngest of 3 brothers. There was that part of it too.
Shortest?
And, no, I was, I think I might even be I think one of my brothers is about the same height. One is a little bit shorter than me. Rugby player. The rugby player is a shorter one. Like, robust. but it kind of started there, right? And back to, there's a great book. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You, from Cal Newport. And it's a Steve Martin saying, because Steve Martin they asked him about, like, how do you become successful? And like, hey, become so good they can't ignore you. But it's like, it talks about deliberate practice, right? And deliberate practice, and even the book shows, and there's tons of studies, the better you get at something, the more passionate you become about it, right?
Right.
And I can confirm, like, I was not as passionate about basketball. It was something else driving me to get better. But when
it was that chip on the shoulder.
The chip on the shoulder, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, it's, when you're not seen, like, we want to be seen, and we do a lot of dumb stuff sometimes to be seen. That was part of my life too, was being, in crime and selling drugs, and that was like, how do I feel in control? How do I feel power? How do I feel seen, right? But again, you do sometimes stupid things to do that. But in ball, it was like, I worked really hard, so I started becoming better. And as I became better, I did start falling in love with it, right? And a lot of stuff is like that. This is kind of what we're talking about earlier.
Right.
Pre kind of start was this idea that like, if you work really hard, you get better at the thing, you become more passionate at the thing. And there's even tons of studies done as like doctors are more passionate about the work later on in their careers. And you could go to any industry, right?
Right.
But if you don't put in that deliberate practice and you don't put in those hours, first of all, you're not going to be as good at the stuff, right? You're not going to build that career capital, but you're also not going to be as passionate about it. And again, that's been my experience. And it's also, there's plenty of research behind that. But that kind of led, so I, in my teenage years, when we were 7, I moved to London for 4 years, came back. We came back right in 91 when the Balkan War was going on. So basketball was a big part of my life. And then when I was like 13, 14, because my dad stayed in England, I kind of got into, I was in the streets a lot, doing dumb stuff, got into crime. So my life was like basketball, crime, and then I'd show up in school a little bit. Yeah. Enough. But it, and so that phase is, and I really do, when I say, basketball saved my life, I really did, because I was kind of at a point where, I had to choose, and I chose ball,
right?
Because I loved it so much.
Versus the street life.
Yeah, I mean, and the street life, I guess the part there, at least for me, that was, when you can make a buck, I could go to a rave, and then back then it's like ecstasy was the drug, right? In Europe, it's like the raves and stuff like that. And you'd go to, hang a rave, and like in a night I make as much money as my mom did working 2 jobs. Right. It's like, as a kid, in that status, right? Like then I buy a flip Motorola phone that nobody has. I show up in school, I got gold rings, and it's status.
Like you're the man.
You feel that, and so that's difficult to let go of. But I love the sport enough to where, and you know, my coach would know what's going on. So he's like, man, look, like there's only a couple ways this can go. You know, there's no good route that this finishes in. And I did take that to heart. And you know, I would start, for instance, because I was doing dumb stuff around the city. Is like I come to practice late, you know, at times, and then like he'd bench me, and that hurt. You know, so he would kind of make a point, like I don't care. You know, like you're not, even though you're one of our top players, like I'm not going to play if you don't do the right stuff. You know, if you're not on time and so on and so forth. And I did. I was like, oh, I can't mess around. I can't not play. You know, I love this so much.
So coming from the streets, what made you respect the coach? Because you see it, you know, in some of those movies where you got the trouble kid. He's a good ball player, but he has that street life. But somehow he still respects the coach.
Certainly the in a sense, a father figure. And what I mean by that, like, you know, my dad was awesome. I mean, my dad basically, you know, stayed in London so he could try to make a better life for us, right? Because when we all, like from 7 to 11, we all moved back because we couldn't, you know, the economy in Slovenia and the Balkans was really bad. He got let go and tried to start a side hustle, which eventually ended up working out, but we had to go back. And there's actually, so when we went back, my mom went back to working at the bank, and then with her friend, she opened up a gym, you know, because that's kind of like, there is a little tidbit story of like, why did I go into coaching and gym, you know? So she would work at the bank first part of the day and then go run the gym. Her friend would run the gym first part of the day. And it was like a little, I don't know, probably 2,000 square feet, 1,500, like membership gym. It was at the top of this partisan building, because in Slovenia, you'd have, in Yugoslavia, you'd have these like physical education buildings, right? Right. So it was right at the top there. And I mean, I kind of got lucky there too, man. It was, you know, top powerlifting guy in the country was training out of there because he lived close by. Right. So he'd show me a lot of stuff. And then at the bottom of the building, this is kind of wild. There was two gymnastics guys. One was Aljaž Pegan, we're like 5-time world champion.
Right. Olympics.
Best in the world. Yeah. Like he was a straddle, and they would come up to the gym. I mean, they were in a little shitty gym at the bottom that was kind of like legendary. Yeah. But they'd come up and do stuff and do bodyweight stuff and do specific exercises. Same thing, you know, they'd show me things. So I got, you know, and so I'm probably about 13 years old at this point in time. And I'm scrawny, and like the gym, you know, this is the other part of it. It gave me, like, you know, I put on muscle, I got stronger. It showed on the basketball court.
You're surrounded by
jump
good people.
Higher.
Yeah.
So it gave me stuff. That's why I bought into it, right? I was like, ooh. And by the way, this is 94, right? You know, 95. Dude, 94, 95, you know, basketball players are not known to like to lift weights, or that's part of the culture. That's when people still believe, like, if I lift weights, my shot will go off.
You'll be slower.
Slower shot, crooked, you know, all that stuff. Like, don't lift before you shoot type of, I mean, all that crazy stuff. But I saw the benefit, and I got really into it. Like I would read stuff, you know, by the time I was 15, I was reading like Charlie Francis, like Speed Trap, and everything on T Nation, and, you know, everything I could get my hands on online at that point in time were books. I get, you know, stuff from Verkhoshansky and Zyorsky and all that stuff. But if you asked me, I would never be like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna be a sports performance or strength coach, right? It was like, I'm learning this because I got to jump higher and want to dunk. So underlyingly, I was already having deliberate practice for this field.
Educating yourself, acquiring knowledge.
And I just didn't know it, right?
Because you were passionate about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that connected to what I wanted. Because at that point in time, if you ask me what I want, it's like, I want to play pro basketball. That's it. Like, that's the only thing I care about. But to me, it was like, this is going to help me get there, right? Because if I'm only, you know, and I wasn't 6 foot at age 15, but it's like, I'm shorter, so I got to be stronger, faster. I got to jump higher. I got to do all these things, right? But the reason I brought that up, because it does attach, you know, I think what led me into the field of fitness and sport, gyms, because throughout that phase, you know, again, ball kind of got me to get off the streets. But it's like, the thing is that when I was about 17, I was still in the game, like, very deeply, and then things happened that made me go, oh shit, you know. like this is now making me realize that like there really is only two routes. It's like you know, you go this route and it's bad and you're in jail and you're dead, or you go this route and you pursue ball.
Right.
And when I was 17 with our team, we went to America to do the Eastern Invitational Basketball Academy in Trenton, New Jersey. And the whole thing was supposed to be, let's compete against top high schools. It's gonna be an experience for, you know, for us as the players. And we went, and like I loved it. I loved it, and like I did really, really well. But I had no idea about like college ball, this, that, the other. To me, I was already playing like Division II, you know, junior, like pro Division II as an under 18, you know, because in Europe it's a little bit different. And there was a guy that was my coach at Eastern. His name was Wayne Jones, you know, and he goes, "Hey man, like you ever thought about going to play college ball?" And I was like, "Not really, right?"
Yeah.
And but a great dude, and we kept in touch. And so, but that year was the bad year, you know. And it's like, when I say bad year, is let's just say people I was dealing with, you know, they were in court. They'd bring me like records of all my conversations being recorded, shot at, like all these crazy things, right? And like, and Wayne kept staying in touch with me, right? So at that point in time, I'm like, you know, he's emailing me. He's like, "Hey, how about you come out to Eastern Invitational again next year, right?" And he was from Denver. So at one point in time, I was like, okay, you know, I got nothing to lose. I got the money. I could pay for it. So I went out to Denver, trained with him for 2 weeks, like high elevation. Then we did 2 back-to-back EIBCs, right? Again, I'm going into this scenario not knowing anything about scholarships.
Right.
You know, Eastern Invitational was in like basically July, right? There is no more scholarships in July left, by the way, right? But I go and I play like exceptionally well. And then there's a bunch of schools there: Delaware State, Quinnipiac, Western Michigan, all D1s that are like interested.
Right.
But interested, you know, they're like, "Yeah, man, like, you know, you could walk on a year and
walk on."
You know, and then I would look into how much these schools were. It's like $50K. You know, like, and I mean, there was no. I even remember talking to my dad and like mid-sentence, nope. Like mid-sentence, like no, okay, nope. You know?
So explain to people like what $50K was in Slovenian dollars, or because was that the deterrent, or was $50K like reasonable, but he just didn't want you to go?
50K is. I mean, in Europe, at least for us, school was free, right?
Yeah.
When you look at university, you know, to pay $50,000 for a year. And by the way, it's like, you know, I think the cheapest one of the schools was like $42K.
That's still a lot of money.
But that's like, that doesn't mean there's not other expenses. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah. That's just to get in the door.
That's like there's other stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was just unreasonable. And so that kind of, you know, was like a wah moment. But that year I had a different coach. You know, I came there with Wayne, but I had a different coach. And that coach was like, "Hey man, like I used to play and coach at a school in upstate New York. He's like, you're good. Like you'll start first year, but they don't have a full ride, right? Like you can get some money towards it. It's a D2. Like you can't get everything paid for." And I was like, okay, but this gets me here, right? Because at that point in time, I was like, I want to pursue ball. I want to, like, that was still the mission. The mission was pro basketball, but it was also like, all right, how do I complete school? You know, how do I get away from, you know, again, the negative pull, right? And so I came back from Eastern Invitational, I think August 3rd, and made a decision. And it was pretty much go to the embassy, start doing all the paperwork. The school was Broome Community College in Binghamton, New York. And my first day of school was September 11th, 2001.
Oh, wow.
So I was on the flights about 25 minutes out from landing when the towers got hit. The first tower got hit. So then we had to fly in the air until we ran out of fuel because we couldn't. They were like, let's go back to Germany.
They cut the airspace.
Yeah, because you couldn't come in the airspace. So it was like 2 options, like go back to Germany, but we didn't have enough fuel for that. And then we just kind of flew around until we got permission to land in Nova Scotia. And I was in a military camp in Nova Scotia for a week before taking a bus to New York and then going back upstate. So that's I guess it's not as short as I wanted it to be, but I think it kind of creates context around, you know, I did 2 years there. I got a full ride in Southern Virginia, in Virginia Intermont, did 2 years there. And then from there I did end up going pro. And you know.
Where'd you play?
My first year I actually ended up playing in Ukraine, in Himik, which is about 45 minutes from Odessa. Very, like at that point in time we were the second best team in Ukraine, made it to the ULIP Cup. I left the team by that point when they made it to the ULIP Cup. but very high level. And then from there I went to Slovenia, Krka Novo Mesto. I'll say some things that people will be like, I don't know what the hell he said.
We'll just Google it.
And then Triglav Kran. And so, and that was, my pro sports career, like I always want to be like very transparent about everything as far as like how things are. By the way, I would never have taken it back. I even played, I made it through free agent teams on the NBA Summer Pro League, the last one in Southern California, which is pretty much like, it's 500 some players, 24 spots on 2 free agent teams, and you play 2 games. And you got 2 games, and like I made it. So that was a pretty big deal, at least for me personally. At that point in time, I ended up having a pretty big time agent sign me. But the thing about pro sports is that, and I'll speak for basketball, obviously. The good thing about it is that there's a ton of, I would say, places to play, right? So you could play for very little money in D3 Poland, or and now it's even more international. You go to China, you can go to Japan, you can
Mexico, everywhere.
There's a lot of places, and there's so many ball players. You ask like an agent, they used to get CDs, it's just like CDs, like here's 5,000 players that are willing to play for $1,500 plus, living expenses, right? Because they just want to hoop. And it's tough. Like I had my last year when I played for Triglav, like I didn't get paid for most of the year, and it's like you're doing 2-a-days, you go to the gym, you're doing practice with the team, you're doing shoot-arounds, you're doing all that stuff, and sometimes it's like, well, the team will say like we didn't, and it could legitimately be true, right? They got a certain amount of like sponsorship money that they were promised, and then mid-year business ain't doing that well, and they're like, sorry, we're not gonna give you this money, right? But we got to pay to play in the league. We got to pay the refs. So then they owe you, and then they do stuff like for one team at like the end of the year, they owe you 6 months, and it's like, hey, we can't pay you 6. If you sign off here, we'll pay you 3.5. But then you got to sign that you're okay with it. But if you don't, like we might go bankrupt, you get nothing. Like, these are real, like very real things, and not just like, there's a lot of leagues. There's super big time leagues where guys were, like on contract, you're like making $200,000 a year, $150,000 a year. They're not getting paid.
Wow.
And they're practicing for months, and it's like, and you kind of are like, well, if I stop practicing, then they can be like, there's a clause in there, you didn't come to practice, so you don't pay.
Then you're really not going to get paid.
It's wild, man. It's wild, and it was, an incredible learning experience, but it was also one of the things that got me to where I was like, do I want to continue? Because I could. I even got an offer. I was at D2, Division 2 in Portugal, and I just kind of set it to where I was like, well, I want to make. I can't make anything under this much money plus expenses paid, and then you get offers, under that, and it's kind of close, and you want to, you want to go like, no, do it, but I personally think, I'm glad I didn't, because I've also seen guys that played for a long time, and look back and say, man, like, I wish I didn't keep going, because it's like you feel like this is the only thing I know and I have. But the cool thing that happened in that time, because I was always into fitness and training and sports performance. Like that was, it'd be like I wrote the strength and conditioning program for our basketball pro team. Because I was like 206 pounds. Right. I'll tomahawk dunk it. I could jump, I could run. I was like crazy condition.
And you weren't the tallest guy?
No, I'm certainly not the tallest guy. And, they'd be like, dude, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I write my own programs. Like, I'm really into this stuff, and then I write a program for the team, right? And back then, my brother brought me in to train with one of his friends and start with kettlebells. And like, this is, way back,
social media kettlebells.
Oh yeah. Like before they became popular in the US and all that. Like Pavel was just kind of getting, Pavel Tsatsouline and RKC was just kind of starting to get a little bit bigger. And basically, he brought me in, like we trained. I was like, man, this shit's hard. Like, okay, I started kind of falling in love with that. And he trained a group of his friends. And trained him for a while, and he was like, man, like, I just don't have the time to train him anymore. Right. Would you train him, right? And I was like, yeah, because I wasn't making money, so I was like doing stuff for him, for his translating agency. I was doing all types of shit, right? It was like, but this is the funny story. Like, I'm a pro basketball player. I spend 5 hours a day practicing in some way or another, right? Yeah. But like, I have side hustles just so I can play pro ball, So that's sometimes the reality of this that I think a lot of people don't see. But I was like, yeah, for sure. So I started training his friends that were former, because my brother played soccer, so they were former soccer guys. And, after the first session, like they tell my brothers, like, man, like he's just got it. Like, I don't know what it is, but like this is his thing. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I had a ton of knowledge, right? So now we're looking at, 12 years that I've been lifting, studying this stuff.
Right.
But I just wasn't like, I wouldn't consider myself like I'm a trainer, right? Because I'm a ball player. But all of that deliberate practice and career capital really came out, and I really enjoyed it. And I started, like, I trained at this gym called Sokol, which was just a membership gym close in my area. And, the way that I was training, people were just asking me, like, what are you doing?
Right.
And then once I started training them, I was like, oh yeah, I can train you. Like, we're talking about like for €5,
right.
like zero money pretty much,
Yeah.
right? 10 euros.
Yeah.
But like very quickly I had a bunch of people, right? So it'd be like practice in the morning, go and train folks,
right.
Practice in the evening. Like that was my day. And then I wrote an article about back pain. And back then I've had a lifetime of like kind of back issues.
Right.
And that Sokol magazine had a pretty big publication, right? Like let's call it tens of thousands, right? And I wrote this article about back pain. And then I had people start coming in and going like, oh, is that the guy that wrote the back pain article? And I was like, yeah, And so then people wanted to start to train with me more.
Right.
So now all of a sudden I'm like, training for peanuts, right? But like, go to practice, train people all day, go to practice again. And
building your name.
Definitely building your name. And another thing that we started, and that was with my friend Giga and my brother at times, we'd go to this park called Tivoli. It's kind of like I don't know, kind of Central Park, but it's got hills. It's got, in Slovenia you have like pull-up stations and logs to carry, and like it's basically very physical education. Right. People go for hikes and walks, and we'd come out there with kettlebells, ropes, couple kegs. It was like very old school.
On top of the logs that they already have there.
Oh yeah, it was dope because it's like a little spot, and Molstitz is called like this like very physical education area, and we'd start training, and it was like at the beginning it was like 3-4 people, right? But then it became 6, and then people would come by and go like, what the hell you guys, because it was kettlebells as well. So it was like, what are you guys doing like with these metal balls? And I'd say, hey, we're here again on Friday. Come try it out. Yeah. It was very organic, and it went to 8 people, and then 10 people, and then 12 people, and then a couple of groups. And that's when I went to my brother and said, hey, like, I have this gut feeling, man. Like, there's something here. Like, we got to open a gym. And I even hired, so at that point in time, there's a guy that was like the number 1 guy consultant for gyms in Slovenia, and I paid him a bunch of money that like pretty much I didn't have. And, he's just like, hey, I love your enthusiasm, wow. Like, but he's like, this won't work, The reason there's no gyms like what you're talking about is because there's no market for them.
Or the market doesn't realize they want it.
I had proof of concept. Like, I knew, like, I was like, yo, you understand? Like, we have 2 groups of 10 in the woods. Yeah. Like, going nuts. Like, the results are amazing. Like, people are loving it. I'm training people at the gym. Like, it's not like I have nothing to go off of, right? I just had a gut feeling. Yeah. So it took me a while to convince my brother. And then we ended up opening, it was a room. It was a 470 square foot room, which is, maybe double the size of this, maybe. And we just started training groups. And in months, not all day, but the times kind of like before, after type of work thing, we were really busy. Yeah. And that made us go to a 2,200 square foot spot. And from there, I actually ended up moving to the US because I got married, from my college sweetheart at that point in time. She was in Renton. And it was a really tough decision because here's this thing that I was so into and I built, but I also knew that I knew how to speak English. I lived in America. I was still kind of like, part of me was still like the basketball dream, but I was so into it and I pulled the trigger, right? I basically ended up moving to Renton.
So from Slovenia to Renton.
Slovenia to Renton,
because of, your relationship.
And at that point in time, I started from scratch. I started working at LA Fitness, Yeah. When I look back, it's kind of like foresight 2020 type of thing, right? Every one of those hard things was really good, right? I mean,
it molded you into who you are today.
And it's like you have to, I had to have I had so many different experiences in practice, because then you go to LA Fitness and it's like, all right, build it from scratch. And I had to actually, I couldn't afford just being a trainer at the beginning the way that it was back then. Right. So I was like a training manager, which means you'd sell. But I was also coaching people. But the thing is, I wouldn't get paid for coaching because I was a training manager. So what I would do is like, I'd go to other coaches and go like, hey, take these, because I'm training the people.
Yeah.
So, but I was working wild hours though, like 80 to 100 hours a week, like wild hours. Because I'm doing my full shift and then I'm spending about 20, 25 hours a week coaching people. But because I can't get that money, I'm going to other coaches going like, hey, do you want to take these sessions? Here's the only deal. Give me half in cash.
Yeah.
Right? So they're like, so you're giving me half the money. I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, it's a great way to, for people to be like, I like that guy. But it's like, it was one way of getting money out, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the people I'd sign up would go, I don't want to train with anybody but you. I couldn't give them to another coach.
Right.
Right. And then I became, even there I became a training manager. So now I was like managing stuff. I had to learn a lot about numbers, KPIs.
Running a business.
Yeah. And it was, which is, by the way, they give you this position called the weekend manager. It sounds good, but it means you work weekends. You know what I mean? So then I would be like,
it's exactly what it says.
Exactly. It's like, you work weekends and then you supposedly have like Monday, Tuesday off, but Monday, Tuesday now gave me an opportunity to coach people, right? So I'm a 7 day a week, like all day person at this point in time. And look, again, when I look back, I'm like, I'm grateful for it because I bust my ass and I really learned a ton. I was getting in front of a lot of people. I was, and I was always like reading books like How to Influence and Influence People, Keith Ferrazzi's Never Eat Alone. And I would do that stuff in the gym. I'd always communicate with people. Like all the other coaches would just be doing, well, I'll say all the other coaches, but a lot of other coaches would do whatever it be. Like I'm going around introducing myself to everybody.
Right.
And then so by the time, and I'm not pitching anything, right? It's like, I'm like, hey Larry, what's going on? You got legs today? Cool. Hey, let me know if you need anything. All right, hey Mary, how you know? You got your intervals? And it's like you start connecting with everybody, right?
And it shows you care.
You care, you build rapport, and then it's like, do you mind? It's like always permission based asking. You go like, hey, do you mind if I give you some feedback on that? Like I'm not gonna just give you feedback because you know how people go, I don't need you to tell me what to do. It's like, you mind if I give you some feedback? Yeah, for sure. Boom, and I'm gonna give you a tip. And now I was like, damn, that does feel better. Hey, my low back doesn't feel tight anymore, right? Great, glad that could help. Let me know if you need anything else. Boom, walk off, right? And then you start connecting. And by the way, like Big Box Gym, like you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people, in my shifts, that all of a sudden people start asking you, which is what you want. Hey man, like when I do this, now you coach them up.
Right.
And then I'd come up and say, hey Larry, listen, my 6 o'clock just canceled. I got a session for 30 minutes, man, if you want to take it. Like they already paid it for you. Right? Oh my God, boom, they jump in. Right. Now I get an opportunity. I put them through a session. They're like, this is like night and day. Like my own training with the way can I get XYZ sessions, right? And it's like this, it's always delivering value, right? And that was the mentality behind that, and it gives you this, I don't know, a lot of folks will complain about that, but I'm like, man, like in a lot of ways, Big Box Gym is a huge opportunity because you can get so many reps, so many opportunities to improve if you're studying the right thing, right? And so even though when put it this way, I had 100% had a identity crisis, right? Because I went from play pro basketball, winning I was in Nike Battlegrounds finals and all that good stuff, and now all of a sudden I'm living in my mother-in-law's house in a small room. I have no money, and I don't have a car. My wife's dropping me off at LA Fitness, and that's where I'm at.
Big Box Gym, and it's like so. How did you deal with that mental? Because when you say Nike Invitational, EIB, all those, it's right here, right? You've reached the pinnacle of the sport, and then this was almost like your personal recession, but you didn't treat it like it.
I think that. Look, I'm going to say what I feel now. What I was feeling back then was like, it was a chip on the shoulder again. To be honest, right? Like, okay, I gotta build. Like I've been here before. I just gotta. The thing that I knew was work, right? Like I would always outwork people. Now, like by the way, there's a story where that can kind of bite you in the ass, right? And I would say I learned that the hard way as well. But. I mean, there's just no way around, if you want to be successful, whatever it is that you do, you got to work really hard, right? It's like 50's book, right? Hustle hard, hustle smart. Right. But I feel like to even hustle smart, you got to first hustle hard. So you even know what the hell that is, right? But I kind of went back to that. I went like, okay, like I I did so much work and practice in this one field. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. The thing is, the advantage that I had is that I, at this point, remember, I've been lifting since I was 13 and studying training since I was 13 years old.
Reading books, consuming knowledge.
And now I'm like 25, you know, so it's like, that's 12 years of experience.
Right.
And not only that, I was training people. I was training pro teams. I was like, I had a good chunk of actual experience of training different types of folks and messing up, because it's like, you know, there I am, like pro athlete training at the highest level, but then I would get some clients that are general population, kind of just starting off.
Yeah.
And, you know, would maybe train them a little too hard at the beginning, and I learned through experience. So at this point in time where, you know, somebody else is just coming into the fitness industry, although it felt like that for me because I was starting from scratch, I had a lot of experience, knowledge, and I would say confidence, at least, behind my training, right? And there's a great, like, there's a formula that when people go like, well, how do you build confidence, right?
Right.
And I think it's 3 things. So one is competence. If I practice a skill, you're like, the more you practice it, the more confident you're gonna feel about it.
Like, so for us, it's
100%.
drilling.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, like ping pong left-handed, right? At the beginning, you're like, dude, I'm not confident. But 30 minutes per day for, 3 months, you're gonna be confident, right? Way more confident, that's for sure. So that's 1. 2 is courage. Like leaning into hard things. I mean, there's no way around like getting better than doing, like, just leaning into hard shit.
Right.
You're gonna eventually have to, oh my God, I'm not good in front of the camera, and I'm not good on podcasts. Well, if you keep avoiding it, you're not gonna get better.
Exactly.
So you gotta be courageous and do it.
And you gotta get the reps in.
You gotta get the reps in. Like, if I always break everything down to practice, right? I take everything and I'm like, this is like basketball. My left-handed hook shot sucks. I got to go and practice it, and then I got to make it more intense. Then I got to start bringing others in to try to block it. Okay, cool. Podcasting or video, we talked about it, right? At the beginning, man, try to create useful content with your phone.
Yeah.
Okay, now you've done that for a while. All right, watch yourself. Are you doing too much, right? Too much. Clean it up. Okay, cool. Are you now going to get some lighting that's a little bit, right? You just keep practicing and improving the thing. And it's the same here, but like, the third thing I think that when it comes to confidence is production. So again, if I can look back and go like, I've done 100 videos, like there's some confidence I'm gonna build up through that, right? Because competence is like, I'm training the skill, but production is like, I've actually done the fucking thing.
Right.
I wrote 50 articles, 30 of them suck. But I wrote, like, I'm
look
writing.
At the last 10.
But I'm putting it out there, right? I'm producing. Like, what made me go to my brother and say, hey man, like, listen, I got no money. I know you got some money. Not a lot, but we got enough to start this gym. And at the beginning, it was like, I don't know. But I was like, I had production. I'm like, yo, we got 2 groups here. We got training people here. People are loving it. People getting results. Like, production gave me the confidence. And so you can't figure shit out on a couch.
Right.
In theory, like, like, cool, make a plan. Have a path and a plan. Absolutely. But that's not gonna, like, in theory, is not gonna give you confidence. Like, you have to do. So, in that time, to come back to the story was, from there I went to Vision Quest, which Vision Quest know well. Which
we used to produce fights over there.
Man, this is such a cool story, by the way. Like, so I went to Vision Quest. Chip owned it back then. A friend of mine, Rich Lindsay, brought me out. May he rest in peace. Great dude. And I started from scratch there again. But it's like, Rich came in and was like, Chip, this guy's the best in the world, and I was like, hey, if you can give me 30 days of money to like pay for rent and stuff like that, after that, we're fine. And it was only one, so if you remember back then, it was only one Vision Quest, right? And they had the boxing ring, or the MMA ring, and they had the mats and everything else. And I came in and I just went gusto. I became probably the busiest coach, like, pretty fast there. And, won like 2-3 Biggest Losers in a row. As far as like the results go, I'd always go like, can I speak at these events? Nobody else wanted to speak. I was like, I'll speak about nutrition and this, that, the other. I was writing emails to my client, like all this stuff that like was so far ahead of its time. I had a blog, I had a website and a blog, and I was writing blogs in between breaks. And I also started at that point in time. This was the first that I can remember. I went to Chip and said, hey man, I think we should run a boot camp. And I was in this mastermind mentorship thing that was teaching how to run boot camps, right? And they were like, oh, we did that, it didn't work. I was like, it didn't work because it was not me doing it, like, you know. So eventually, like, I convinced, you know, like, hey, let's get some med balls, let's get some kettlebells, let's get some stuff like that. Let's open up that area in the back, you know, let's move some of these bicep curl machines. This shit ain't gonna do anything. And they put a little budget, a little like speaker, you know, with the mic. And then I was like, all right, and we're gonna put it on EFT. And they're like, hold on, what do you mean? I said, we're gonna do recurring memberships for the boot camp. So like on top of the regular membership, I'm like, yes. They're like, you're nuts, right? Because nobody ever did that. Like you couldn't go to big box gym at that point in time
and charge extra.
Exactly, and charge extra. I mean, this is 2006, 7, so
$25 a month membership.
Yeah, like theirs was like 19.
Yeah,
and so my thing was like, we're gonna charge $95 for 2 times a week of my boot camp, right? And I finally convinced Chip, and it's like we ended up opening with like 70 people, right, and crushing. And so in that time, what also happened like is that that was a tough time because that was pre-recession to recession. Is when they bought out a ton of other gyms, right? But then they took that model. So all the stuff that I was doing, they took that model to a lot of the places.
I think they still have the Biggest Loser competition.
Yeah, they always had that, and we're running it. And I mean, they sold that to LA Fitness for a lot of money. But it's also like to come back to the story.
Right.
So I was running. It was like an 8-week challenge in a boot camp, and DJ's wife came.
Yeah,
and did that. And so they didn't even know each other at that point in time. So she came to the boot camp. That's how they met, because DJ was training at AMC out of Vision Quest, because I was training with them, right?
Yeah.
Drew Brokenshire was there, and DJ, and I'd always like show them stuff with the kettlebells, but I'd also train with them. So it's kind of like full circle. I remember when I went to Japan to the first one fight.
Yeah, we were there.
And you were there, so it's like, and she was like, man, do you remember this story? And I'm like, I kind of do, but you got to film me. And she's like, well, I came in and I had great results through your program, and I met DJ, and I was like, fuck, this is cool, full circle, right?
Full circle
story. But it's, again, it's to me, that was another place where it was like, I just got to build more experience and work. And I went, when I came there, everybody would like, in the interview would do the same thing. I want to be part of the company, I want to grow with the company. And I was like, Chip, I want to open my own place. And he was like,
you're very upfront about it.
What do you mean? And I was just like, hey, I just want to be honest. Like, everything I say I'm going to do that and then some. But this is what I want to do. And I did that and everything I said and then some. But what happened is that a gym popped up, a little garage popped up, sooner than I thought. And I got that same gut feeling that I got in Slovenia when I was like, we got to open up a gym.
Is this the one in Renton?
That was the little garage in Renton. And I went to him.
It's not a little garage, by the way.
I mean, it was 1,000 square feet. The first one was 900,000 square feet. So it was small. That one was legendary, man. Yeah. But, and I went to Chip and said, hey, man, like, something opened up. Like, I got to jump on this. But, I was like, I'll train here. Chip was like, look, take 3-4 of your clients, promise me you won't solicit, and good. Shook the hand, came into work, didn't tell anybody about it, because it was, 25 minutes apart, probably 30. And I did exactly that. I went back to the way I launched. So I was working both places, right? So I started my gym.
Wow.
These were like absurd hours. I spent like, I'm not exaggerating. I wouldn't even recommend it, but I mean, we're talking, 100-hour weeks, like easy, for years.
This is the stuff people don't see.
No, and it's, because it was, for example, that year where I started my garage gym, so I'd get up at 4:45, I'd run like a 5:15, 5:30 boot camp. After that, I trained some semi-privates. Drive up, first thing I do is train Chip. My Mondays were 13 clients in a row.
Wow.
Mostly one-on-one, some of them like I was doing semi-private, because I brought the semi-private model to like big box gyms at that point in time at Vision Quest. So I'd be done at like 8, drive back, train some athletes, then train with my crew, get done at 11, go home, write an email, write a blog, study research, go to sleep at 1:32, wake up at 4:45. Again, like Sunday through Friday, right?
Right.
Not recommended. But it's like, I didn't know what else it was like, I know work, I feel like this is what I got, and I'm gonna just, I was so driven, and I was just pushing, and then I would just start taking days out, right? I'm not, now I don't work Saturdays anymore at Vision Quest. Then I don't work Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I just come and do the boot camp.
So you started replacing the income that you were earning from there, or you just decided?
No, so literally as soon as, basically it was like, well, I kept my promise, number one.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I will do this until then, right? So it's like, I never wanted to ever go back on my word to him. That's why we still have a great relationship to this day. But the other thing was, I was like, when I can literally pay for like my rent and like ramen noodles, I don't give a shit if it's like just the lowest of the denominator. Like I'm gonna kind of wean off more and more and more, and that's what I did, right? It wasn't like, but this is a mistake that people make, by the way. Like, how many times do you hear the term like entrepreneurship? Like you just jump and build wings on the way down.
Yeah.
But if you read, Adam Grant has a great book called Originals. And
Originals?
Originals, right?
Originals.
And it talks about a lot of the successful entrepreneurs and the statistics behind it. Most people that do that thing where they just go, I'm just gonna quit my job. I know I have kids, but fuck it. They don't do well. Most of them fail, right? So to me, I was just like, okay, look, like I'm gonna build this revenue up. And then when I'm like, okay, even though this would be really hard, I know now if I go all in on it, but I can already make it. Like,
you've already proven the model.
I'm already proving it, right? Like if I go even all in, and I'll be good. And that's why I went with it. Hormozi has a really good example. He's like, if you have a side hustle business, this is a formula. You go like, when do you decide, let's say online coaching, right? Let's say in fitness, it's online coaching. And you've been training, but you want to go online. I say, well, when do you determine that? I said, you get close to what your income is, but you got to maintain it for 6 months. So this is the big mistake, right? People go and they launch something. Launches always make more money, right? Like it's fresh, it's new, whatever, right? And you get this. But then it can give you that like, oh yeah. Every month is good. No, it's not. Every month is not going to be like that. So it's like keep a steady income that's close to, what you're making, or enough to where you're like, I can be good with this. But it's got to be for 6 months. Then go all in.
Because that gives you enough time to cycle through the bad months, or
it gives you
to figure
time,
stuff out.
And it gives you the proof of concept that you already, as a side hustle, can make this much money to make it, to survive, right? So that's a great formula. I tell that to people, right? Because people are like, I think I'm ready to go. I'm like, cool, show me your numbers. I'm like, man, good month. Whoop, pretty good month. Whoop, okay, whoop, good month. Dude, that's like, you'll be stressed out of your mind. Right? You have to get to a place where you have predictable income, right? And sure, it might fluctuate a little bit, but like it's predictable enough to where you're like, I feel confident that with my side hustle, I can do this. Now, if I step off and go full on in, of course I can grow this revenue, right? So that was kind of my approach. So I ended up being in Vigor Quest for 2 years, but like about a year of that, I was already running my gym, right? And then when I went all in, I mean, it grew. I mean, it grew. But so just to be clear, like I started my gym in 2008 in the recession, right? Like, and it is no shit. I'm not joking. Today, it's 15 years. So it's 15 years. Not today. This week, because I couldn't give you the exact date, but like this week is when I started 15 years ago here in America. In Slovenia.
Same location.
No. So no, we went from.
So the garage wasn't next to the current
it was on the same street. Right? Okay. So it was Burnett Avenue 101. And from there, so that little, probably about 3 years that I was in that place, which to be honest with you, that last year still might have been one of the most profitable years, even with everything I'm doing, like for the gym, right? Because from there I went to 4,700 square foot space, much bigger, nicer, really grew the business there. I was there for almost 6 or like 5.5, and then I ended up buying a building probably almost 7 years ago. Now, January will be 7 years doing construction on it, and that's where we are now, which is 332 Burnett in downtown Renton. So I bought a kind of older historical building. It's like 12,000 square feet, and redid it. And it's, I mean, I'm biased obviously, but it's cool.
I mean, I've been there. It's
cool.
It's a cool spot.
There's the gym, but we have smoothie bar, acai bar. We got a med spa, nail salon, physical therapy inside. We're bringing a DEXA Fit business in. We're building a cold plunge and a hot sauna like room. And there's more, right? Like it's kind of like become this symbiotic, I guess. There's going to be 7-8 businesses in there by March of next year, But also in that time, I mean, so I've been coaching basically for about 19 years, right? Because I was already coaching when I was playing pro ball, and there's a lot of stuff that I started, going back to that whole like career capital, deliberate practice. Like I started doing YouTube 14 years ago it wasn't like I'm going to be a YouTuber.
Right.
It was just like, I would go to, conferences and like, hey, there's this YouTube thing. It's probably smart for you to start putting up videos. And I just did it. And like, at the beginning, it's kind of, if you go back and look 14 years ago, you'd be laughing at me. It's like, I lift weights, I like do some crazy workouts and shit.
Check out this kettlebell.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it was like we're flipping 1,000-pound tires and doing wild workouts. And I mean, it was fun. But, with time, I would kind of do a little better, make it a little more educational. And at a certain point in time, what would happen is, I got to like 10,000 subscribers, which actually is pretty hard to do on YouTube, And then it kind of made me go like, oh shit. Somebody said, hey, that's pretty damn good. Like YouTube is hard to, it's not like back then. I mean, back then there was no social.
Right. Yeah.
But, and so then I started making a little bit better and a little bit more frequent, but it was just like a very side hustle thing, which it still is, by the way. Right. But then, it's like, I really started getting into creating content. And even before that, like I was writing emails and writing, like you go back, I got hundreds of blog posts, I wrote guest articles for, pretty big publications. And just to preface that, I probably wrote 100 of my own articles before somebody said, I like your stuff. Would you write it for my, because this is the mistake that people make, right? Like you write 3 and you think you should be on Men's Health. Yeah. Like I wrote for years before anybody thought my stuff was good enough for a okay publication.
Right. And they give you a little spot in the magazine.
Absolutely. Right. But I mean, now I've written for Men's Health and for T Nation and for bodybuilding.com. I mean, I could blah, 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 right? Like been in all the places. But it was so much deliberate practice before somebody goes like, hey, I like your stuff. Right. Same thing with social. It's like what point in time did it kick off, or YouTube, or like you do it for a really long period of time trying to get better. And then, you have that tipping point, that Malcolm Gladwell talks about, right? It's like that little meme, it's like somebody's digging and turns around, but it was like this far away from the diamond.
This close.
and the thing, that's actually, that's my old Hocevar performance one. That was the gym actually you see on, you got to go to Vigor Ground Fitness and Performance now. That's that new. There you go,
But even that website, right? Look at the difference.
Yeah, like there's this evolution of everything, right? And I think it's that it's important to, think about how much, because again, going back to, there's coaching and there's the business of coaching, and I could probably go to any industry, right? Like in your industry, for instance, if you go to financial advising, and it's like there's the skill set of actual financial advising, but then there's like, I want to build a business. So that now has sales, marketing, systems, delivery and fulfillment, hiring, firing, leadership, right? Like
it's all similar to what you're doing.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And I could take, I don't know, plumbing, right? You go, there's this like, man, this guy's a phenomenal plumber, right? But then opening a plumbing business, you have to know how to market the plumbing business. You have to have a back end system. Do you have software that's included? Do you know how to do SEO, social, paid ads? How about like managing people? I mean, it's a whole world, right? And for me, it's like when I got into, goal number one. I actually got this from Stephen Bartlett. I want to bring it up because I think you'll like that. He has in the book, like, so imagine like 5 buckets, right? How you build your career in anything. Right. And first bucket is what you know, right? So it's like learning, so the knowledge of it. I would say the cheat code for me, apart from being obsessively curious. I mean, I read so much, I study so much, it's absurd, right? But I've been in a mastermind for 17 years. Wow. So when I would just say broke, I worked when we were doing like the training in the woods and everything else, and I played for Triglav, so I wasn't making money from that pro sports team. I worked for my brother in a translating agency. He ran a translating agency. And I said, hey man, like, instead of paying me, I want to be in this mastermind. That was like at that point in time, like $400 or $500 a month, which was absurd.
That's a lot of money for
my brother
back
was
then,
like, "Fuck, man, what is this shit?" Yeah, and it was a Trainers Inner Circle, right? It's like teaching trainers how to, basically get clients, build business and stuff. And we didn't even have a gym, but like I had it. It just clicked from like so much reading and studying. I was like, everybody that's successful says it's smart to do this, right? Right. And so you go and learn from the people that have done it, right? They've been there, done that, and are still doing it. Yep. So that was one of the smartest moves for me because it built my confidence. I was learning from good people. So that's number one bucket is what you know. Number two bucket is what you do. Because there's a lot of people I talk to and they're like, oh yeah, I know that. Okay, cool. Can you show me where you applied that?
Right.
Well, I haven't really.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're just in theory.
Yeah.
And it's like theory and reality are two different things, right? It's like training. People go like, well, Luka, it'd be smarter if you did, this type of work or that type of work. I'm like, oh, do you have a class of 40 people?
Yeah.
And some newbies, and that person has a fused spine? Well, no. So where do you apply this model that you're talking about? Like, well, I don't. Oh, you don't. So yours is all in theory.
Right.
So everything has to be put into play, and in finances it's the same thing.
Same
it's
thing.
like you're talking, but then you sit down with the person and then you're dealing with their fears and frustrations and their, doubts and everything else and their desires. And it's like, in theory, he says this, but it's not the same, right?
Yeah.
So what you do gives you wisdom. It's like Martin Rooney would always say, knowledge minus action equals nothing, but knowledge plus action doesn't equal results, it equals wisdom. Because you might take action and be like, oh shit, this didn't work the way I thought, but you learn from that, right? So that's bucket number two is what you do. And then bucket number three is who you know, and again, when I started doing like TIC and I would go to so many seminars, like all of my money that I basically made that was a little extra and I save up, everything, I'm shit you not, like went into my education. Everything
you reinvested in yourself.
Everything. At this point in time, this will sound like an absurd number. So I've been to like 320 events in the last 17 years, live. Now, a lot of them, also I've spoke at now because I speak a lot. But before that, it was like
you were on the other side
all the time. I've first seat, second seat, taking notes, VIP. If I can go to lunch with the speaker, like everything would go towards that, right? But also, after a couple years, I'd go to events and everybody would be like, "This dude is at everything." So I built those relationships. They're like, "Man, this person's really pushing and investing in themselves." And now you go to lunch, to dinner with people, and they're like, "Hey, let me introduce you to this other speaker," right?
Right.
And you start building that network.
Because you're putting in the work, and then they see that.
Absolutely.
They're like, "Man, this guy's everywhere. I want to help this guy."
And the thing is like, there's a saying, it's like, buy yourself into rooms. I agree with that, right? That's how you get into masterminds and stuff, right? But over time, I think that the beginning, how do you get to know somebody that has so much stuff on their plate and it's hard to get to, connect with them? Yeah, you invest in a seminar, a mastermind, a call, or whatever, right? You spend that money to get in that room. And, ideally what you do is you create value in that room, whatever it is, and then build that rapport, build that relationship. But eventually you want to earn yourself into rooms, right? Where people, today it's like I get asked to do a lot of stuff because like, man, we love what you're doing. We love what you created. Like, will you come and do something, right? So you want to eventually do that, right? But and by the way, who you know is exceptionally important over time when it comes to career. From there is like what you have. And then what you have is like, think assets. But assets is not just like
stuff or
like my car, my watch. No, assets is like, the Vigor Ground website that I put so much time into it so it generates an organic lead per day.
Right.
Or my social media that took me fucking so long to build, or my YouTube 14 years, or the blog post I wrote, or the book that I wrote last year that's coming out, actually it's been taking me 2 years to write. It's probably gonna come out in April, hopefully. And then the courses that I like the assets that like will live forever. And I think that, if the people thought of that and said, am I creating assets that are valuable to others? So if I create a post, I'm always like, is this gonna be useful and valuable to the person reading it? And if I know my audience, right? Like, for example, if you're in a financial space and one of my friends that's in that space and I'm helping him because he's got he's trying to build like this financial app that's really cool.
Right.
And he knows his stuff. He's been in the industry for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
But he's like, oh man, I'm struggling with the content, this, that, the other. And I sit down with him and like, I know finances pretty well. I mean, I've done a bunch of investing and stuff. And I start like literally going, all right, this is the camera topic. Boom, and I rip it for 60 seconds. And I do 5, 6 in a row. And he's like, the fuck? I'm like, I know it. That's your fucking thing. You should be doing that, right? But the thing is, I've practiced it enough. And I'm like, all you have to think about is like, when you sit down with a client and they're like, Dennis, I want to invest in blah, blah. And you're like, ma'am, do you mind are you open to some suggestions? And then you give them some ideas that are valuable for that person. Okay, cool, go on camera, do that, right? Now whoever's listening to that, that's valuable to them.
Yeah, because I mean, who they see in camera is who they see in front of them.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, you're to me
So
always
you gotta get over yourself.
You got to get over yourself. I always say, like, that person, right? That's my friend. Like, we're having coffee, and Tony came through and asked me something about training or something about the gym business or whatever else it may be, and it's like, and I'm just like giving you my best.
Right.
Hey, man, listen. That's what content is, and it can be written word and audio, like a podcast, or both, right? But to me, that's when I say, okay, what you have, I think about like human value capital. Like, what am I passing on? When can somebody go? When you go on YouTube and search, I'm like, there are like 1,800 videos. You know what I mean? Like, there's hundreds of podcasts that you can listen to from me, and then hundreds of guest podcasts, hundreds of articles, thousands and thousands and thousands. Like, you could literally go and spend like 10 years learning shit. And I feel like I haven't done enough. You know, I'm like,
yeah, because you're still going.
Because it's like always creating. So to me, it's like my mission is the things I do in the real world, I'm going to share them, including my fuck ups. Right. But I'm not going to talk much about what I don't do. Now, I do a lot, you know what I'm saying? But my point being is like, because that's where it's like, learn, you know, what I know, what I do, then who I know, then it's like what I have / what I've created. Because now, I mean, to me, the best business card today, what do people do? Nobody calls you up unless it's a referral. It's like, hi, I'm looking for a fight. No, they LinkedIn.
They look you
IG,
up.
They
see what
Google you.
Yeah.
And it's like, if they go and they go like, you know, fortunately, unfortunately, if somebody looks up your stuff, they're like, damn, this guy's got like 300,000 followers here, 120,000 here. Woo, who are you? That's your business card, right? And then they read your shit. It's like, damn, this shit is good, right? And that's how they make a decision, right? You build relational equity with the stuff that you put out, that you've created, and that's when, you know, over time, you know, talk about lead. If we're going to talk business and lead generation, it's exactly that. Where like people start hitting you up, and you're just like, hey, I followed you for 2 years. Like, I want to start doing something with you. I want to hire you for this.
Because you provided that value.
Because you provided that, exactly.
And then they're ready to take action, as opposed to say, hey, so-and-so, you want to do this, you want to buy this, and you haven't even asked them what they needed.
Exactly.
Or they need it right now.
Because the thing is, like, think of it as a bucket, right? That like, every time I create value for somebody, you build this relational equity bucket. And every time you ask for a sale, so let's say I'm like, hey, I got this promo going on for whatever it may be, that's asking for a sale. I'm taking a little bit out of that relational equity bucket. But if that bucket's full because I give so much, you can ask more. Right. But what you're seeing today is like people don't create, but then they're asking a lot. Yeah. So you got a bankrupt bucket. You know, like, hey, we don't even have this equity, but you're asking me for a lot. You know what I'm saying?
That's a really good way to look at it.
So that's like my mentality as far as like what when it comes to creation. You know, now you got a lot of different platforms. I just am a little nuts and obsessive that like I've, you know, YouTube, social, podcast, email, like all that stuff, right? But again, if you listen to the story from where we started, I started emailing like 15 years ago. You know, so I learned to be good at email. I started writing, you know, 17 years ago, and so it took. And I wasn't good at the beginning, but I just practiced it. So it's over. When people now like, I want to do all of that. Like, no, don't. Like, become good at a couple of things and become like really fucking good at them, right? Because then at the end, the last bucket, the fifth bucket, is what they think of you, and that's reputation, right? So think about it. If you turn what you know into what you do, and then you connect with people, because those people, by the way, what you do, it's easier if you do great stuff. It's easier to build your network. Period. Yeah. Right. And then from there, it's like you create a lot of assets and resources. At the end, you have a reputation, right? And again, if you have a good reputation, look, it opens up a lot of doors for you. And those 5 buckets become your career. I know that's kind of like the short of it, but
we have to pick up that book.
Yeah, it's called The Diary of a CEO. So Steve Bartlett, he has one of the top podcasts in the world. Great stuff. But you know, to me, the mindset is like really at first. I think that what's happening today, is great book. And by the way, if we want to go to book recommendations, oh boy, I got a lot of. But
send me your top 5.
Dude, I got it.
For real.
I think that what's happening today quite a bit is that, you know, I think there's a lot of good stuff about this, the power of social media, but there's also the negative side effects, right? Because people get bombarded and they go like, oh my God, I'm going to do all of these things. And I can tell you that like the first 7 to 8 years of my career, I'm absolutely obsessed about training and then like my gym.
That's it.
You know, I would say the first decade, those two things, right? Like, and I mean like obsessed.
Yeah.
Like I can't, you know, it's hard for me to even like sleep. I have to like get better. I have to create like.
I'm guessing you never watched any of the popular TV shows that have come about.
For a long time, no.
Right.
And you know, like here's the thing too. Like looking back, I would tell people like I'm not saying you should do things the way that I did. I knew what my strengths were, and I was like to outwork people, you know, and I made a lot of mistakes. I knew that's how I could kind of get ahead. I think I definitely pushed it somewhat, but it's interesting because, you know, my girl will say like, man, like you're nuts, right? You know, I'm like, I am, but it's like Naval Ravikant said, when we look at people that we aspire in some way to be like Elon Musk or whoever else, or Jordan, right? If you watched The Last Dance.
Yeah.
And what people want to do is they just want to choose certain aspects of that person.
Right.
But it's like, you can't. You have to take the whole of them. You have to take the good with the bad. And it's like, there's a reason why in certain areas they are a genius or whatever, right? And then they have these downsides where it's just like, man, you know, if you've ever listened to Elon talk about, he's like, you don't want to be me, right? He's like, it's not good to be me. He's like, I can't stop thinking. I can't, like, it's honestly, it's hard. I wouldn't want that for anybody, right? But from the outside in, people are like, oh man, I want to be Elon. Look how much money he has. He does whatever he wants. You can't just have that. You got to have the other stuff that's really difficult, right? Like that's really, really difficult. And so for me, it's like, well, you know, there was difficult parts of that because I sacrificed a lot. I mean, like, you know, if you look at my 25, that led also to, you know, I got married young. I was married at 24. You know, I got divorced at like 31. And, you know, my fuck ups, by the way, right? Like, but it's like, I'm young, I'm learning along the way. In my mind, you know, I come from socialism. I'm like, gotta make it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the most important thing, and I have to take care of my family, like that's it. And then you miss a lot of stuff, right? And it's like when other people were doing whatever, I'm gonna hang out do no hanging out for the weekend. I'm working, I'm learning, I'm creating, that's it. I mean, I'm talking about 52 weeks a year almost, for years and years and years and years.
15,
like, what is the weekend?
17 years.
You know what I mean? Somebody will say like, do you recommend that? I'm like, no, like listen, you got to pick and choose what you want. And you got to know that there's a price to pay for whatever you choose, you know? And like running a small business, and I'm sure I'm not like, go and ask anybody that's been in small business for 10 years, which by the way, 3% of people make it 10 years. You know, I'm at year 15 in America and 17 in Slovenia, right? Like it's like very small percentage of people that make it that far. Like you have to be willing to do things like that. They're just difficult, you know. So there has to be a purpose behind what you're doing. It can't just be like a money thing. It's got to be something more. Nothing wrong with, by the way, with working to make a lot of money and create, you know, financial security and wealth for your family. Absolutely, it's like you bust your ass, you deserve it, you should get it. But like if I look at the last, you know, 17 years from the time we started in Slovenia, if I look at both continents, countries, you know, multiple recessions, COVID. I got stories of wild shit, you know, at the gyms, on both gyms, right? Like of stuff that, you know, happened. I even mentioned a thing to you that's just happened like, you know, 48 hours. And it's like, you got to figure it out. Like, and nobody cares, you know, like the economy doesn't care, this person, like you just have to figure it out. And I try to prepare people for, like, and I'll just take the gym business because again, that's where I live and breathe it. But, you know, somebody works a coaching job and it's like, all right, like, I think, you know, I should make more, so I'm going to go start a gym. And I'm like, cool. Like, if that's what you want to do, you should absolutely do that.
Right.
But here's some things. Like, you're going to work 3 times as much and make less at the beginning. And you have to be willing to, I'm not saying you're going to have to, but you have to be willing to work 12, 15-hour days, right? It's like, well, maybe, no, I'm not saying you have to. Maybe you figure it out and you'll do less.
Right.
If you're not willing to, this won't be successful. Because what happens when you're like, oh shit, this really does need 15-hour days, right? And then you're like, if you're not willing to do it, it's the beginning of the end, right?
Yep.
And when I started any business, you know, it was like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, right? You have to.
Right.
It's always harder than you think. You can somewhat get prepared for it, but it's like the iceberg that we talked about, right?
Yep.
You just see the top of the
People
iceberg.
just see this top.
90% of it is at the bottom, all the stuff you have to do that people don't see and what it takes. And I would never discourage folks to do it. Like, it's like, if you believe in your heart, it's like, you have this, that's what you want to do, go for it. Like, I'm the first person that would be like, follow your dream.
Right.
I mean, seriously, like,
you write coaching programs on this.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, it's like, I I believe in people more than they believe in themselves majority of the time. Like, but there has to be, I think, a reality check of like what it takes. There's a book I posted yesterday. I think it's a must read for any entrepreneur or somebody that wants to get into business.
Well, what is it?
It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Oh yeah, I read that. I read that.
It's great. Yeah. It's worth a reread, right? And yep, that one right there.
Yeah.
Because
Matt actually gave me
building
that
a business
book.
when there are no easy answers. And it's like legit, like the amount of times that I've faced the whole like, there's no easy answer. You're gonna have to work. You might need, it's like, hey, it's a season. The next year, 9 months, it might be like, you're gonna have to work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. It might be the season for that. You know what I mean? Like not because you want to, because that's what it's gonna take to get you out of the shit show or to get this going or whatever it may be.
And how bad do you want it?
It is, it is. And it's not for everybody. And by the way, like I think that, man, when I started in business, being an entrepreneur wasn't cool. It's kind of weird. You're a weird person, right? Now it's cool. So it's like, people are like, oh yeah, it's cool to be an entrepreneur. Yeah. So like, I want to say I'm an entrepreneur. And it's like, listen, nobody gives a shit. Like, build the life that you want. Know what it takes to build that life. It's like, I forgot who told me this. It said like, hey, it's much better to be a number 5 at Facebook than be like a number 1 in whatever you're doing. It's like, no matter what though, like I believe, another great book is by Seth Godin. You got to be a linchpin. And I tell my coaches this. I tell anybody I coach, I'm like, what is a linchpin? Is somebody that's like irreplaceable. It's very hard to replace them. Like, you become so valuable that if you work for a company, right? It's like, fuck, we're gonna have to get 3 people, or damn it, like this person did the job of 7.
Yeah.
And that gives you options, and it gives you, I would say, power, right? So it's like you should become, a linchpin, no matter what. Like, forget about it whether you have a company or not. Like, anywhere that you are, that should be the goal. And I feel like today it's almost like the averages end up being like, I'm gonna finagle, how to get the most out of it. But it's like, no, you should always go how to deliver the most value. And you hear this quote a lot, which, look, I agree with it. People are like, know your worth, right? But before you know your worth, I believe you have to show your worth.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not like, if there's smoke and mirrors, I'm like, let me show you what I can do. By the way, like, I mean,
and especially like the generation now, it's just like, there's a lot of, I want it now.
Yeah, it's like, I want it before I show it, right?
Yeah.
And even today, and like, again, I've been in the industry for almost 20 years. I speak on big stages in fitness and other industries and blah, 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 blah. When I start projects and, I have brand sponsorships now and stuff like that, my first thing is like, I'm going to show more worth than they think that they're going to get from me, right? I'm still thinking like a linchpin, even though it's like, I'm established. It's a way of living. It's a way of being, right? It's not like a time, like, it's like learning. Right. Somebody said, I'm in season of learning. No, you're either a curious learner or you're not. You know what I mean? If you're in a season of learning, I think that's not a great, like,
because it's fleeting.
It's fleeting, right? Yeah. It's like identity. So if you think about identity, it's one of those things that like, you build identity through what you do, right? It's like James Clear talks, you cast votes for who you are. So if I read every day after a year, I'm going to consider myself a reader because I've cast enough votes for that, right? If I've created content for years, people call me a content creator. I'm kind of like, well, it's not my main thing, but I do. I could say that, like, I am a content creator.
And you've been doing it for ages.
For ages, right? Because you've cast so many votes. Basketball player, like, look, I don't play ball competitively in any way anymore, right? I still consider myself a basketball player because I've cast literally 20 plus years of votes every day for 5 hours per day to build that identity, right? So my point behind that is like, what is your identity? And identity could be like, are you a kind person? Do you open doors for people all the time? Well, when you do that all the time, you're gonna be like, yeah, I am a kind person. Are you a fit leader of your family? Like if you go and work out for 8 weeks, you won't say that you are. But if you work out for 2 years and your kids are watching, always train and eat healthy, you'll be like, yeah, absolutely, I am.
Yeah.
So you're casting votes every day for the things that you build your identity towards, right? And I think that there's this kind of like pyramid of how you take action. And I promise it'll attach into the identity conversation. It's like this. Most people have a thought, and that thought drives an emotion. And then that emotion leads to an action. So for example, right, you're like, oh, fuck, I just got done with work. I'm like, I'm really tired, right? And then tired literally makes you feel tired and like soggy. And then you don't go work out. So you lay on the couch and watch TV. Now, the way that to do this, instead of going through that sequence, which is a thought, feeling, and an action, is why don't you start with identity? Who do I want to be? Who do I want to become, right? And then you'd say, well, what would this person do? So you go identity, action, and then you'll get a feeling, and that feeling will probably be the one you want, right? Yeah. So it's like, well, the fit person, even though they're not motivated, they still go and do it because we know motivation is not the key.
This is that higher calling.
Correct.
Right.
And then when they've worked out afterwards, they're like, man, I feel good. I'm so glad. You know, nobody, like at the gym, you know how many people come up like, I didn't want to come in today. I'm like, me neither.
Yeah.
You know, but hey, I'm excited to coach you. I'm excited to train. And then afterwards, how you feel? Oh, I'm so glad I came in. Every time, right? Every time. So it's like you can't go off of thoughts and feelings. Those are actually, I would say, they veer you astray. And by the way, like if you're, finances, tell me what happens if you're an emotional investor. Yeah. You're fucked.
You make bad decisions.
Always. Like think about every bad decision you made. Forget about money, but like in life, it was always because of an emotional reaction. Jealousy, envy, anger, whatever. Want to get back at them. Boom, and you do something dumb. Right? So you can't make that your filter. Your filter has to be identity. Or having rules in like when you got to finances, like, oh, I'm gonna automate this. Hey, if it falls like this much, I'm gonna sell. You know what? I'm not gonna do any day trading shit. I'm not good at that. But I'm gonna do, S&P 500 on the index, automatic out of my account.
You got your system.
Whole life insurance, boom, automatic, right? Like you, and it's like you got rules, and it prevents you from being emotional and doing dumb shit. So I think that's a very, very important equation. That's like I talk to clients about that. Like I say, hey, who do you want to become? And at first they're like, what do you mean? I was like, let me explain. If you go on an 8-week program, that's what you do. If you do it all the time, it's who you become. Right. So sustainable nutrition. How do you want to, who do you want to become? How do you want to feel? How do you want to look? Training, 7 days a week. Can you keep doing that for years? No, probably not. Okay, cool. What can you do? All right, cool. Let's make that part of the program, right? And so I think
make it the standard.
Yeah, exactly. What's the foundation? Like, what are you going to do on your worst day? Not on your best day, right? What are you going to do on your average and worst day? Because to me, being better in life is about like bringing your worst and average days up. Everybody's peak is great. Everybody's great day is fucking great. Right. And I had Brad Stolberg, who's a good friend of mine. He's wrote some awesome books. And he said, people mistake greatness. If you're good enough for a really long time, you become great. Right? And it's true, because, by the way, I'm one of those guys that's like, greatness every day, But when you think about it, though, if you can just be consistently very good, like you will be phenomenal. You'll be great. You'll be Hall of Fame. Like it's like baseball, right? Yeah. And you threw 350. So, you hit 1 out of 3. You're in the Hall of Fame if you do that forever, right? Like, and I think that in life, it's the same thing. If you go back and I don't know, look at my videos or podcasts or whatever. They've gotten better and better, obviously, right? Yeah. But it wasn't great all the time, but I just keep showing up, right? And if you keep showing up for 10, 15, 20 years, it's like Sun Tzu said, he said, I'm going to last long enough to where I see the bodies of my dead enemies like go down the river past me, which is a great quote, right? Because it's basically what he's saying is like, I'm going to outlast everybody, right? I'm
going to outwork you.
It's like, I'm going to be here for longer. And just because of that, I will be ahead. Because most people quit. You look at, by the way, this will blow your mind. Yeah. I hope you're past this, but do you know what the amount of, the average podcaster, the amount of episodes they do?
10?
7.
7?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking earlier about
this better be 8, man.
We're past that.
Okay,
yeah,
let's go.
We got enough for a year.
Dope, awesome. Yeah. But this is like actually, I'm going to pull something else up right here. I got some, some notes that I write to myself.
Yeah.
And all right, let's see.
Big shout out and a huge thank you to Zekin for making this happen. They have an amazing platform. Check out their website, zekin.com, zeacon.com.
That's crazy. 7, and then they just quit.
7, yeah. But it just shows you, right?
Wow.
And then how many podcasts get started every day. And I sometimes took I took a year pause. Actually, during COVID, I picked it up. And then after that, it was a lot of stuff to do. And I wish I wouldn't have, but I paused it.
Right.
But I got back to it. I'm like, I don't know, 170. We had 2 shows, 170 episodes on my main one, and then Yoga Gym were probably like 50, and I think I've done a couple hundred guest ones, right? But now I'm like 1 a week. But it's been like 6 years pretty consistently, right? Again, you look at YouTube videos, and you can go and look at it, and you'll see the consistency, right? You go to Facebook, you'll see the consistency, and that's the kicker, right? It's like when
that's the key.
When we talked about the buckets, that like what have it done, the creation, the assets, right? That's the thing. Somebody goes and looks at that. I mean, here's what like, if I don't know anything about you, but it's like, damn, this person's been consistently doing this thing for 5 years. Like, I know something about you now.
Right.
You can stick with things, right?
You're
like,
dependable, reliable.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it's like, if you can be, if you can do what you say you're gonna do consistently, dude, that's 1% of the world, right? This brings me to this, because it's like, even for one of my presentations this year that I haven't done yet, it's like these 4 things, actually 5. I got 5 different things. This is gonna eventually be a presentation for like the industry that I'm speaking this year, but 5 different things. Number 1, deliver value. So there's a book I read probably 14 years ago by Bob Burg. It's called The Go-Giver.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I had a client give that to me.
It's so I reread it every year, right? It's like this fable. It's a fable, but when I read it, it just clicked for me, and I was like, I'm gonna operate like this, where everywhere I go, I'm gonna give with no expectation of receiving.
Right.
And by the way, like, it's a really quick read, so like, read that book. I promise you, it's a quick one. If you don't get fired up after it, I don't know what to tell you. There's 4 books. It's like there's a four Go-Giver series, but the original one's the red one. So that's a principle to me, right? Principle is like, deliver value, whether it's in person, I meet with you for coffee. When you leave, you're like, damn, like, Luka gave me value, right? Yeah. Training session, they get more than what they thought they're gonna get. I meet with somebody for a business lunch, they leave with an idea. Like, that's how I'm thinking. When I put up a post, it's gonna be valuable to people, right? Like, every single thing that I do, I wanna make sure I deliver value and be a go-giver. Number 2 is collect role models, right? I learned this from a buddy of mine, Jason Harris, in his book. And so imagine that, like, and we've all been doing it, by the way.
Yeah.
So when you collect role models, for me, a big one was Richard Branson and philanthropy and the way he does business, right? I read every one of his biographies, autobiographies. I'd study him. And in 2016, this is crazy, I got invited to Necker Island to meet him with Maverick. And it was kind of like—
How'd you get invited?
So I applied, there's a book, this guy Yannick Silver, who's a huge marketer back in the day, ended up becoming a big philanthropist, did a lot of stuff with Richard Branson. He wrote a book called Evolved Enterprise. And Evolved Enterprise was about, how for-profit businesses are doing work to either create money, social support, all these different things, like in creative ways. So I bought like 50 books, because I was like, oh man, I love this. This is how we're doing it. Because at Vigor for now 14 years, 14 years, we've been doing charity boot camps. We've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, food, clothes, I mean, you name it, right? And pre-COVID, like every Saturday at 9 a.m., you drop in, you pay, we give it all away, right? We still do it now, we just don't do it every Saturday. We had 3 in a row. We've just raised $5,000. We had one where one client came in, and should I say, one fan of the Seawolves came in and wrote a $20,000 check. So we raised $24,000 just that one day for Happy Bundles. And so but it's a thing we've been doing for a long time. So when I bought those books, I also bought the course. I'm the ultimate upseller, by the way. And you can upsell me and everything, right? And then it was a forum, and it was like, hey, how are you doing Evolved Enterprise in your business? And I filled it out. I was like, hey, we essentially, do this every Saturday. We collaborate with other, small businesses to to do stuff for the community. And then also, I teach this in my business coaching for gym owners. Like I teach them to start running charity boot camps because they're great for community. They're great for like positioning. They're great for getting new people through the doors. So I fill out this form and like, in depth and like kind of forget about it. And like 3 months later, I get an email that at first I ignored because I was just like, this is weird, this looks spammy. It's like, hey, like you gotta let us know, like you're invited to Necker Island. And I was like,
is this like
I didn't respond.
Sweepstake?
Yeah, it just came from an email. I was like, I don't know what this is, right? And then Yannick emails me 48 hours later and goes like, hey man, like, and so I knew obviously who Yannick was, and he's like, hey, like you won the Evolved Enterprise Award. Like you're invited to Necker Island.
Yeah.
And so I had some stuff going on. I obviously fucking canceled it. Went to the Virgin Islands, stayed there for 3-4 days.
Wow.
Got picked up, stayed on Necker for a day and a half. Did we had all these courses and drink and play golf and crazy shit and party, and it was an incredible experience.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like full circle because of this idea of collecting role models. Now, collecting role models goes. To me, like it's like I'm not a parent yet, right? But like we're planning on having kids like next year and working on that. And I have some friends that are exceptional fathers, right? Like, and I shit you not, like I have notes from conversations with them about how they lead their family, right?
Yeah.
And to me, like I'm collecting them as the role model for like when I'm a father, right? And then you have again, business and philanthropy, Richard Branson. What about content creation? I can collect role models in all these different areas and aspire to that and go like, hey, how are they operating? And then I tend to, I love reading biographies and autobiographies. I like to follow them and see how they think and what they're doing and how they're operating and learn. Like, you know what I mean? Like you collect role models so that you can, Yoshi Yamamoto, the famous designer said, copy, 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 and you shall find yourself, right? And people talk about like copying is a bad thing, but and you can call it mirroring or whatever it may be, but like, man, I copied, I would say so much, it's like I would copy great coaches. I'd copy great basketball players. I'd see a move and like, I'd go practice it for hours. I'm copying them, right? But within it, like you do what Bruce Lee did. Like you take the useful, you discard the useless, and you make it your own. That's, and so I think that idea, like the principle of collecting role models is very, very powerful. From there, it's hunt for skill sets. Hunt for skill sets. Again, it's like, let's say, you mentioned at the beginning, like, man, when I started doing podcasts, I thought, it's whatever, we'll just shoot some stuff. And then you're like, damn, like, this is more challenging. And like, if I chop this up, it's better. If I chop that up, it's not as good, right? And so then at that point in time, you go like, I want to hunt for the skill set of being better at podcasting and better at cutting content that maybe goes viral, right?
Better at asking questions.
Better at asking questions, better at sales, better at marketing. Paid marketing, organic marketing. I mean, I can go down the list, right? But you hunt for it. So I've always been a person that when I say always, I mean, for real, like almost always, but when it came to business, if there was a thing, I'm like, I want to learn that, right? I mean, I'm buying like best 5 books on this topic, going through the best course, hiring the person that like is awesome at that for a call or even a mastermind or a weekend. Oh, it's $5,000 for the day, $10,000 for, that's a lot, fuck it, let's go, right? I'm gonna dive deep and I'm gonna hunt for that skill set. And then as I'm learning, I'm gonna apply it at the same time so that I'm like getting that fast feedback loop. Oh shit, that did work. That didn't work that well, what did I do here? And then I can check, right? I can check back with them like, hey, I did that, what do you think? So my process of learning is like 10x of somebody else.
Right. It's
dabbling in it a little bit, they didn't hire anybody, they don't have any feedback loops.
A few Google searches.
Exactly. And so, to me, it's like that idea is like, you want to build a skill set, hunt for it. You know what I mean? And you do that, by the way, with the analogy that I call the watch and the wallet. So the watch and the wallet means, where are you putting your time and your money, right? When somebody tells me like, look, I'm committed to this. I'm going to get the best shape of my life. I'm like, okay, cool, let me see your calendar. Where's your training session?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not in there. I'll get it in. No.
Yeah.
That means you're not committed to it,
right?
Like, so you're gonna do it after everything else? Like, that means it's not important enough, right? It has to be on your watch, your calendar, or it's not important. Wallet, you said you're committed to this. I see drinking and eating out 3 days a week, 0 supplements, no gym membership, no coaching, no money spent on health, right? No saunas, no this, no that, right? Like, no massage, okay, so how, that means that you're not telling the truth, right? What you're committed to is, again, if I look at your Mint, I think they shut Mint down or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But that gives you like where you're spending your money,
right?
And you look at your calendar, you
can
break down your day.
tell what a person's about.
And it's like, and I can tell you who you're gonna be, right? Unless it changes.
Right.
But this idea of like, same thing for skill sets, to me is like people are like, I wanna learn to be better at marketing. Don't see it in your calendar. I have content creation in my calendar. I have marketing learning in my calendar. I have marketing creation in my calendar, right? Like I'm doing it. It's not because if it's important, it's going to be in there, period. So that's the hunting for skill sets. Then it's build connections. You kind of see almost like that bucket thing, right? Like who you know. But build connections is like, again, going back to that calendar, right? So let me tell you what I did first 10 years. I still do this, but the first 10 years, it was like structured for me. I'm going to a local restaurant. I'm getting some food. I'm like, hey, I'm a local business owner. I own Vigor Ground. Like, is the owner here? Is Jerry here? All you have to do is look it up, right? I meet him, hey, just wanted to say hi. Like, we got a lot of people to come to your place. I love coming here. Love the scramble. Man, let me know if you got 15 minutes for coffee. Like, I'd love to share some stuff that's working for me. I think that could work for you, right? Build connections. Yeah, how many people say no, by the way? Listen, if they're like, I don't know. I'm like, can I follow up with you? What's your cell? Let me follow up with you. Boom, and I follow up with them. And then I have coffee with them. And then they're like, man, that guy's cool. And guess what? I'm coming into their place and I'm spending money, right? So you're gonna see me like, I'm investing in your business, man. I'm in this community. And I would do that every week, right? I'm going to the cafe, I'm going to Liberty Cafe, I'm going to this restaurant, I'm going to that restaurant, I'm going to this physical therapist, I'm going to that chiropractor, I'm getting adjusted, here's money, right? Hey, man, we'd love to chat with you. And I'm always like, we got people that come here and they love your service. I'd like to send more people here.
Right.
What's in it for me, right? That's what they're thinking, so what's in it for them is what I'm thinking, right? And making a conscious like effort to do that. Again, even like I coach a lot of gym owners, right? Like that's our other consulting business.
Right.
And there's always that conversation like, yeah, I think I do pretty well with that. Oh, who did you go talk to this week? Who do you have scheduled for next week? Well, nobody this week. I think okay, so you don't even know. So it's not like, it's not that important because you kind of do it. You know what I mean? If you do kind of do things, you get kind of results. Right. So this idea, like keeping an Excel sheet, go through the Excel sheet. Who did I contact? When did I contact them last?
When did you follow up with them?
It's been 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Hey, John, just thinking about you. By the way, here's the article that I read about restaurants and like some good marketing strategies that are working in the space, man. Hope you're doing good. No pitch, no nothing. I don't want anything from you. I'm just checking in. How you doing, buddy? Hey, I just found something that could be valuable for you. And then you'd go down the list and like I would hit up fucking like 20 people per week.
Wow.
Right? But here's the thing. Now I walk down the street. Hey, Luka, hey, what's going on, man? Great to see you. Right? And it's like everybody, I started with that first. Deliver value, be a go-giver. Right? And I'm deliberately building these connections. I'm always delivering value. I'm always thinking what's in it for them. And then at some point in time, right, I'm filling up that relational equity bucket. Right. I'm gonna go like, hey man, I'd love to have your whole team come in and basically it's on me. A week of training is on me. Yeah, I love that. Cool. Boom. Get them in. Now we can train them. Now some people want to, stay with us.
They want to sign up.
Absolutely. Right? And it's like, but you got to be patient. It's just like, if you're like, cool, I'll do that for 2 weeks. No, man, do it for 2 years.
Yeah.
For 2 years and see what happens. Now you'll have results before that, but if your mentality is like 2 weeks, you're done. Yeah. You're toast. There's nothing, right? And then the last one, create assets. No, and it's funny because before I read the book, this was my presentation. And then when Steve and Bartlett talk about the buckets, they kind of fall in line, right? To create assets. So assets is, today I'm going to put up at least 2 posts, 3 posts on each platform, right? That's an asset. Yeah. When I post it, is it going to be valuable, right? Is somebody reading it going to find it useful? Yes, asset. I got a podcast I'm going to record today. It's probably going to pop out on Monday. Asset. I got a blog post I got to write for Vigaro, which is a brand sponsor. Asset. Yeah. Right? I'm going to write an email that goes out on Monday for 2 different businesses. So asset. Am I creating assets? Like, am I creating shit and it's gonna be there? Like, you go on YouTube, it's gonna be there. Podcasts are gonna be there, right? And the way the book, that the book was a big one because it's one of definitely more. But man, it's gonna take 2 years, right? Before. So think about it. You start doing it, and I had help. I had a friend of mine, Sean Hyacinth, who was Men Fitness editor for 13 years, knows me really well. Helped me write the book. And if he didn't help me write the book with all I have going on, it'll be like 4 years, you know what I'm saying? But it's like,
you still get it done.
Got it done, but it's like the amount of, time, money, We still got to do the pictures, the infographics. We're gonna have to print it on demand, build a website for it, back end. Like, it takes so much time, money. Like, I mean, tens of thousands of dollars, right, to get it done and get it out. So now you think about it, but there's nothing coming in, right?
Yep.
Zero yet, right? It's a bet on yourself. But I'm thinking about, because I asked him, and he's written 4 men's health books and done a lot of stuff in this space. And he's like, man, this is the encyclopedia of how to be successful as a coach, like kind of a roadmap. And like, coming from him, I'm like, okay. And I'm still looking at the book going like, man, I could put in so much more. He's like, please don't. It's fucking 450, 500 pages, right?
Like, put a volume 2.
We're good. But that was I thought about it and said, man, when this comes out, I just want a person to pick it up and be like, I'm robbing Luka with what I'm paying for this book. Right. And it's an asset. And it'll be there for, I try to write it in a way where it's like 10 years from now, the principles still stick, even though platforms might be a little bit different. Right. Like, that was the whole idea, with a lot of like, hey, click here, get more resources. So I'm building out all those resources. So it's such a valuable piece, right? And then the stuff we talked about before, workshops, certifications, like those things will live on. And majority, when people are like, oh man, you're, like creating stuff to sell. I'm like, yeah, but for every piece I create to sell, there's 200 things I did that are free. Podcast episodes. Right. Like, next week I got 2 vlogs on YouTube. One's 22 minutes, one's 28 minutes. Free. It's like a vlog. Here's nutrition coaching stuff for a beginner, for a coach, how to coach a client. Here's like program design for beginners, for a coach to help with it. Like, and I've got a cameraman that comes in, I gotta pay them, I gotta take my time, I gotta create the content, put it up on a whiteboard, we gotta go edit it, I gotta pay for editing. Like, I make 0, but I spend a lot so that the asset comes out to the world, right? And so really like thinking about this as a long game, right? Because when you think about anything short term, like, I'm obviously in the transformation space, the sports performance space. If you think in terms of like, what can I do in 8 weeks? Man, you have to make the transformation and keep the transformation.
It's like investing, right? It's like, hey, if I invest here, what's the turnaround time? I'm like, what do you mean turnaround time?
30 years. Right? Like, but if you say 30 years and somebody goes like, what? I'm like, look, man, or you're talking about being like a short-term, day trader. Right. By the way, I have friends that are day traders, one that is successful, and the actual success rate is, it's a 94% failure rate in that industry. He'll tell you, very, very smart dude. And it's like, oh, so you want to go into something that's a 94% failure rate. Or, Ramit Sethi talks about this like a lot, where it's like, this is not what you do. Think about this, right? The best people on Wall Street have like a 60, 70% failure rate, right? And S&P beats them, right? Yeah. And S&P beats, I don't know, like 94 or 96% of hedge funds. So if you're not willing to put in a fuck ton of time learning this stuff, but you can still win because you play the long game with something like an S&P index or whole life, or, or things that what to, like, for example, I own I own a commercial real estate that my building's in. I own another apartment building in upstate New York. I've invested in 3 companies that I knew, like one that I made off very well, educated guess, some luck for sure. Right. A friend of mine that's like in the space is like, dude, I'm telling you, this is good. But the first thing he said is like, be willing to lose the money. Right? I invested in a company that's a nutrition company in the fitness space. Why? Because I know it, I can influence it, I liked it before I ever got an opportunity to invest in it. I might be investing into an Everbowl, like with a buddy of mine down in Hunts. Things that I know, spaces that I know, like, that are my skill set, right? The rest is like, hey, I'm gonna do smart stuff, automate it, long-term 20 years, what is gonna go up on average 8%? Got it, boom, right? Don't pretend that you know some shit, you know, because that's how you lose money, right? Like, short-term, I'm gonna make a quick buck. Crypto was like that, right? It's like, people that didn't know what they're doing, but then they made money and they became experts. I told you. Right. Like 6 months later, they have nothing, right? And, and it's like, I was unemotional about that. And I promise you, there was times where somebody goes like, dude, I put in $3,000, I'm up 30K, right? Yeah. And you go like, oh shit, I should probably jump in on this. But then I would go.
But then you'd be jumping in at the 30K point.
Correct. And also, I'm like, do I know this?
Yeah.
Like, be honest, like, how much do you know about this, Luka? And it's like, I don't. I'm not spending the time on it. It seems a little like, long term, is it a good play if you went back? For sure, I still think it might be. My point being is, I've done well sometimes making decisions of not to play, right? And Charlie Munger says, RIP, he just passed away 2 days ago. And great book, Charlie Munger's the Wisdom and the Quotes, phenomenal book. But one of the things he says is like, man, you win when you just avoid dumb decisions.
Yeah.
Right? And
Or you
think
focus on your core competency.
absolutely core competence, and like just make less mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? And learn from the mistakes. And so to me, it's like where a person goes like, see, I missed out. Like every single day you could look at a stock and a company and be like, oh, if I put money in 5 years ago, like, dude, you could beat yourself up all day about shit like that, right?
I should have bought a house 20 years ago, but you were in college.
Exactly, right? It's like, I knew there was gonna be a peak. No, you didn't. Like nobody knew, like you don't know this shit. And so you're just being smart about like, hey, what, again, whether it's guys like you that are like, dude, this is probably a smart strategy for you based on what you want to achieve and based on where you are, and the fact that you don't have a lot of time to go and study this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Automate this. Hey, have a monthly, like me and my girl now, it's like, hey, we have a monthly, like let's look over finances, let's go over investments, like let's spend an hour. It's like it's smart.
Yeah.
Let's change some direction here, direction there if we need to. But we don't have, hours per day.
Yeah, it's not your focus.
It's not my focus,
right?
It's the same thing as like, guess what? I probably got a backed up bathroom right now, and it's like I'm gonna have to call some plumbers.
Yeah.
And I could probably go like, do I learn how to do the plumbing stuff?
Yeah.
No, because it's not I can do other stuff in that time,
Yeah.
and then somebody who's great at that, and they're gonna get paid because I'm gonna have to pay them
They're
for
gonna
it.
finish the job
That's it. You can't do it all, right? And I think that's the, when you keep coming back to, and again, for me, for the industry of fitness, which I believe it's the same everywhere else, whatever industry you're in, like really like looking at it long term, right? And going through those 5 buckets, sharing, I'll repeat them just for the sake of it. Hold on, because I lost
that was
it.
very impactful for me.
Is because this is principle-based stuff, right? It's not tactical, it's not strategic, but if you deliver value and be a go-giver every situation, online or offline, doesn't matter where you're at. You collect role models, you hunt for skill sets, you build connections, you create assets. Eventually, you're going to get to that last bucket of building a great reputation, right, and having great character. And you could take I don't care, like that's a foundational principle, right? It doesn't matter what industry it's in, like that's the game. And I think that, look, the whole collecting role models, this is another probably, I don't know who I'm stealing it from, probably Hormozy, but he said, look at the person that you want to be like, right? Take the industry, go like, man, that person has had success. I would really want to build that success. Okay, study everything about them and then like do everything that they did for 10 years. Notice the number though.
Yeah.
Not year, not 6 months, for 10 years.
10 years.
10 years, right? Now you might get there sooner, but if your mindset is like, I'm gonna do this for 10 years, now you're a long-term thinker, right? And for example, like if I were to go cold turkey, or not just cold turkey, but go like, you know what, Tony, I wanna go into the financial space, right? And I'm like, dude, I'm gonna literally I'll pay you or like intern for you for free, which is funny to me, right? Because it's like, I get people to intern and sometimes now people are like, oh man, is this like a paid internship? Like imagine if like Warren Buffett's like, Luka, 20 hours a week for free. Forget about for free. I mean, like, tell me how much to pay you. But let's say he said for free.
Right.
I would be like, oh my God, can I do 40 hours for free, please? You know what I mean? And because the knowledge that he would bestow would be worth billion. I mean, billions. Like who knows how much, right? So this idea to me is like, if I'm moving into space,
right?
And by the way, I still do this, right? Now I might not be able to do 10 hours. Like I'm driving up to Magnolia, trying to go every Friday to meet with a guy that like, I mean, there's definitely mutual exchange of value, but learning, connecting, figuring out some business stuff, jump in a hyperbaric chamber, like, I look at that as internship, right? Or when I bought the building and it was commercial real estate, like I went to 117 meetings in 1 year.
Wow.
Between architects, between the city, between my accountants, between like I had to do obviously SBA loan for it. I mean, you name it. But it's like I was there because I was learning. And I learned a lot about like, what's this line item? Dude, I think we can get that for less. Can we take it out? Don't put it on here. Don't put it in the loan. And then I had my friend that was like really good at this stuff.
Yeah.
Like she is phenomenal at it. And she was my translator, right? Because I'm like, what does this mean? Well, this means blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, what about that, right? And they almost got annoyed at me at the beginning because like, dude, this guy's everywhere. But I was like, yeah, but I want to know, like I'm putting everything that I've built and earned and everything that I have into this project. I mean, dude, it's my life. I don't want to just be non-involved. I want to know what's going on and make sure nobody fucks me over. I want to learn stuff. And I did. I learned so much in a year plus about it because I was so involved. That was my internship in commercial real estate, right, in construction. And like, I'm not, this massive expert, but you know what? I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough to
understand
to do this project again, which we're trying to do on a bigger scale with basketball and stuff. And again, but it's like, what did I have to do? Be an intern, be curious. Again, like listen to people that are better than you and like let them guide you, and just know that it's going to pay off over time, right? Every single thing that I said, hopefully, is like takes time and work and effort and focus and intent, right? Like. And it's like always the same. And then you get, I'll finish with this because I think it's important. So somebody said, okay, you talk about that, but you do a lot of stuff, right? And another great book is called, this is my top 3 business books. It's called The Road Less Stupid by Keith J. Cunningham. Phenomenal book.
Road Less Stupid.
Like I get anxiety reading it every time because it asks a lot of questions and it just, those questions always lead me to that I'm not doing good in certain areas or I'm fucking up. But it's an amazing book.
But it gets you to dive deeper into what you're doing.
I mean, basically it talks about thinking time, which is what, most of the top people on the planet do. Like they literally block out time to think and ask them questions. But one of the things in that book, which is a great analogy, that I answered this specific person that asked me about, like, hey, you're doing a bunch of stuff, right? I said, imagine like a massive Ferris wheel at the fair. And you're trying to move it. And it's like, it's so heavy. Like they're like, you're pushing, you're pushing with all your might. Like it doesn't budge. And you keep going, man. You're sweating, like everything's fatigued, your muscles are burning. And then all of a sudden it moves a little bit, right? And you kind of go like, oh yeah. And you push more and more and more. And it starts moving faster and faster, right? And after a while, like you put in a fuck ton of effort for a long time. Now it's got momentum, right? And now where it has momentum, what happens? If I stop pushing it, it stops. But I can just go spin, and it keeps going, it keeps going. I can come back a little bit later and spin, right? And so now that sucker's going, right? And I have to put in less effort for it to keep spinning. So to me, business is like that, right? Or at the beginning, all I'm doing as I'm moving this big Ferris wheel of like training, being a phenomenal at coaching clients, getting them results, creating a great experience, and building a gym. And then when I had that spinning, right? Now all of a sudden, I started spinning another wheel, and that was the consulting. But it was like consulting for me was a smaller wheel. It wasn't as heavy because it's like I'm teaching what I'm doing, right? And then you spin another wheel of content, and you see what I'm saying? Now look, I'll be honest too that like there's times where I start spinning another wheel, and then I forget about, or should I say forget about it? I just don't put in enough time and energy and spin this other wheel,
starts
and that slows down. Right? And now I'll kick you in the fucking face, and you're like, oh shit. Can't do that. And what you eventually want to also do is to hire the right people so they help you spin the wheels, right? To me, that's the best analogy I can give about when because I think today the mistake is that like you look at people that are doing a lot of stuff, but you shouldn't look at them 10, 15, 20, 30 years later. You should go, what did they do the first 5, 6, 7, 10, right? And that's why that whole Hormozy story is like, do what they did the first 10 years. Not what they're doing now, what they did the first 10 years. Because you'll see that everyone became successful off of 1, maybe 2 things, mostly 1. And then they branched out of that, right? Because it creates more opportunities. I didn't ever want to, like, I'm not on my resume, people say speaker. And like I speak a lot and I get paid for it,
but that's
quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
But like, to be honest with you, like, I was just saying like, oh man, I need to get a manager for speaking because I probably get paid more, but I go to speak because I talk about my expertise and what I do, and I get in front of audience to build assets, because we usually record it, but like, deliver value, right? And so that idea is like, I started doing that and I started consulting and now I get the brand stuff and I bought buildings and blah, blah. But it's like, those are Ferris wheels 10 years plus 15, 20 years later, right? Like, and I think that that's really important, when you have anybody in any space, to go that singular focus and go like, I'm gonna get exceptionally good at this thing, right? And those people win, right? Because it's like, if you're trying to do 7 things from the beginning, by the way, when your capacity is low, right? Because I also say, I build up capacity for a lot of things, right? Like, you go fly for a weekend and you speak 2 days and you fly back and you're right back to work running 3 businesses, and then you go back and spend 3-4 weekends in a row. And in the meantime, I'm still writing my book and I got to do calls and webinar. Like it's a lot, but it's the equivalent of in the gym, person comes in, it's like, hey, let's do a kettlebell deadlift. And it's hard to do 6 reps of 45 pounds, right? But 2 years later, you can trap bar deadlift 225 for 5 sets of 5,
and maybe add in another workout.
And other exercises, and right? So you've built the capacity to be able to do that. More volume, more intensity. You can do it more frequently, right? Well, business or career is the same thing. At the beginning, like, build the capacity up and then just do it in this one area and be really good in that area, right? And be a great generalist in that area, by the way. So fitness is, like I always say, before you can be a great specialist, you got to be a great generalist.
Right.
And Joel will tell you the same thing. Like, Joel was a great coach, right? And then he was a great generalist, and then he dove in and became the best guy in the world for conditioning, right? Eric Cressy, another good friend, where it's like, he was a great generalist, and then basically it's like opportunities came and he took advantage of them, but then he leaned into and went down the road to becoming kind of the best in the world at strength and conditioning for baseball, right? So every single one of those people will be like singular focus, but
they start as
being a great generalist, like really like building up their capacity. And now, it's like, hey, Eric has 2 facilities. He's director of performance for the Yankees. He's got online stuff. He's got, again, like, I guarantee you he would never say at the beginning, like, yep, you should go and try to do all these things. He's like, you'll fail miserably. Like, man, become so exceptional that other doors open for you, right? So that people are like, hey, man, you're so good at this. Create content. Come and speak about it. Can do stuff online. Get on a podcast for it. Do a seminar workshop in your place. That should be it. And then it's like that will snowball, and then you get more and more opportunities, right? So obviously I'm not like short-winded on anything, but still got some coffee here.
So gotta heat that coffee up for you.
But yeah, that's, I mean, I think those principles kind of like guide me quite a bit in everything that I do. And I mean, I'm more than happy. You know what I always say too? Like, I'd love to do a show. I'm gonna have to do my own show on this, where it's just like hours of talking about fuck ups. Yeah. Because, man, like, I think most
I'll be a guest on that show.
Oh, dude, like, we can go back and forth. But I know, I think that it's really important. Like, first of all, everybody's human. I think the goal is to, I have another rule is like make new mistakes. Like, just try not to repeat the old ones. Learn from the old ones. Don't repeat the old ones, but you're gonna make new ones all the time. And I mean, look, I've made quite a few old mistakes too. It's like you're human, right? But I think there's this idea sometimes that like even when you collect role models, that's why I love reading books and biographies, and I like reading about the shitty stuff. Right? I love reading about.
And they've all gone through it.
And like, man, there's nothing that I love reading more about. I mean, right now I'm going through in one area a challenging time in business, and it's like reading about somebody else that you aspire, to be like, or you look up to, and their really hard time, where you're like, oh man, this is even worse than mine, right? Like, and how did you overcome it? What were you thinking? Like, because there's just no way. Like, there's no way that you go through, creation of a business, managing people, and it's like. When humans, it's the joke, right? The joke, business would be easy if it wasn't for customers or employees, right? But it's like the people, that's the hardest part of it. It's the most important part of it. It's the hardest part of it. And that's where you kind of like, I think that's where the most challenges are. And that's what I've studied a lot. And I've also found that, like, I believe that I'm not the greatest manager. I think I'm okay. I've, built up to be okay. I thought that I was better than I was, and I was like, man, this is not my genius, right? I think management and leadership are 2 different things. And with time, you go like, hey, like, I need somebody that's better at me than this. Like, I'm not good at this. There's somebody who's way better at this. There's somebody who's way better at this. I need to find that person, because this, I become my own bottleneck, right? And that's hard, man. Like I would say, Gary Vee talks about it all the time. It's true. I mean, I think it's been said so much, some people think it's overplayed, but self-awareness, right? That's why I love, reading Stoicism, but because it's like, hopefully I reflect and go like, I'm the problem here, or like, what am I not doing, right? it's the hardest thing, because if you don't know what you don't know, that's going to kill you. Right? And I say that in, back to a fitness example. For example, if somebody hasn't studied enough and they go like, all right, we're going to do like super high rep, overhead barbell snatches with most general population. And it's like, because maybe they learned that through a system or whatever else.
They watch it on YouTube or something.
And it's like, but they don't know what they don't know, which is like, hey, do you know what overhead flexion test is? Most people won't pass it. So if they don't pass it, it's probably not smart for them to be able to go overhead with a barbell. And if you do it like fatigued and technical, this is going to be a disaster, right?
Throw out your shoulder.
And they might not be a bad person, right? They don't have bad intent, but because they don't know what they don't know, they're hurting people, right? And to me, the ethics of fitness is, number one, thou shalt do no harm. I think it's in any industry, right? It's like, if you go to the space of health, like, you trust the people that are helping you. So you would really hope that they don't have a lot of like, I don't know what I don't know, right? Meaning like, look, if you're responsible for a person, and this is a fitness thing, right? This is where I get pissed off, because I take this space so seriously, because I think it's getting a little better and better and better, but where folks will be like, oh, you're a trainer, like you just put it together workouts and stuff. But once a person comes into space and sees like how I look at things, how much I study, what I study, it's like, holy shit, this is like, this is basically doctorate in like, because it's everything. It's from movement to strength and performance, to nutrition, to recovery, to mindset, to lifestyle strategies, to but then you got like the big thing. If you help anybody, honestly, it's like you got to know neurology, behavior change, psychology. You're not going to be a psychiatrist, but you have to understand psychology, right?
Yeah, what's motivating that person
habits.
to come in?
Absolutely, right? You got to, I've dove into more courses than I can ever explain, but like got really good at motivational interviewing. Like because if you really want to help people, you want to learn all those things. So for somebody that comes into space and it's like year 5, and it's like they haven't done any search on this, or haven't done courses on nutrition. They haven't. To me, it's like, man, like, that you're a hobbyist at best, but you're unethical towards the client, because you should be your best to help them. And you can't tell me that like, oh wow, you took one course in 5 years, that's your best. Like that's bullshit, right? Imagine if you're in finance or in real estate and whatever, and it's like you're just not learning.
You're not going to get far. Your skills or
absolutely,
anything
like you're not going to get far whatsoever, man. Like I know my accountants, like they constantly have, like, every year there's all these updates on new laws and new shit. Like, if you're not on top of it, you're not saving your people money, and you could be creating red flags for, IRS to come in and do audits and shit like that, right? You have to stay on top of your game. You have to keep learning. And this idea, like, man, Stephen Pressfield, you know the book Turning Pro?
Turning Pro now.
Oh, dude. So 2 great books from Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art and Turning Pro. Again, quick reads. Like, you want to talk about, like, the mentality, like, now he's a writer, he ended up, took him forever to become, known. Then he wrote the Bagger Vance, right? And then he wrote a lot of other books that have been really successful, but his whole thing about, like, the resistance, and he talks about writers, right? You got to, every day you got to get up and slay the dragon. Like, you could have wrote a dope ass book, but your pen is stuck always. You're always fighting this dragon and the resistance, right? But the Turning Pro book is great, because it's like, hey, like, people will talk to me about how they want to succeed in XYZ industry, but like their behaviors are so hobby-like. And it's like, basically it's the equivalent of like, I want to play in NBA and get, the Luka Doncic contract, right? But I go to YMCA and I shoot around 45 minutes 3 days a week, right? And it's like, that's not what's required, you know? And a buddy of mine told me, like, hey, these are the 3 things that commitment consists of 3 things. Do what is required. So required, like, hey, if you want to, become the best powerlifter in the world, like, you can't go lift weights once a week, right? Like, it's going to be a lot for a lot of years, right? If you want to become a great writer, you have to write every day, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, every single day for years to become a great writer. That's what's required. You want to become a great gym owner, man, first of all, you're going to have to be great at the training aspect, but then learn the business side of things. And you're going to have to work a lot. Like, you're going to have to work a lot. Show me one person that built a great gym that didn't work a fuck ton at the beginning, like, for many years. So there's requirements, right? So commitment is like, do what is required. 2, do what you said you do, right? 3, this is the powerful one. Do it despite of feelings, emotions, moods, and thoughts. Remember we talked about that pyramid of identity? I don't feel like doing this. Don't care.
Right.
Like, I mean,
This is the identity of the gym. This is what you have to do.
absolutely.
Right.
Like, this is who I'm going to become, right? And so, like, I don't feel like doing this. Doesn't matter, right? My girl's like, I'm so, now it's like, I was just having a little speech in my small group yesterday. I'm like, guys, it gets dark at 4:30 now. It's 5 maybe now, but it's going to be 4:30, right? So it's like, it's gloomy. It's, fog over the lake. Everything is like cozy up and eat and da-da-da. It's like, man, like you can't let that. And I went back to the story, right? Identity versus like emotions and thoughts and emotions that lead your behaviors. I'm like, if you're gonna let your emotions like lead your life, you're gonna be a roller coaster of insanity, right? Period. Or what is discipline? A discipline is basically identity, right? Attaching to behaviors and doing it consistently, and then you get discipline, right? And so, and you have to, by the way, like I repeat this shit all day, every day because you have to, right? You have to. And I will say stuff like, like, oh, babe, I don't feel like doing this. I said, hey, who do we want to become? Is that who we want to become? It's like, oh, fuck, okay. But it's true, right? It's true. Like if you let those thoughts, moods, emotions, and like it's really hard too. Like again, coming from a place where hard things have happened in the last 48 hours for me, right? The emotion makes you want to do some shit, dumb shit, right? Whether it's like make a dumb decision because you get pissed off or shut down, like, it's all worthless. But, it's like, no, man, I go back to who do I want to become? And like, okay, here's the behaviors that I'm going to do. And that's the hardest to do when things are hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why I said read the hard thing about hard things, right? Because it's like, man, everybody says shit when they feel good. Yeah, I'll just do this. All right, cool. Let me see you do it when your world's falling apart, right? Like, then that's where it becomes really, really challenging. And if I could, man, like there's one book that I read a lot, like a lot, right? And but there's a book that's completely torn apart because of how many times I read it, and it's from Eric Greitens, and it's called why am I blanking right now? Resilience. It's excellent book. I mean, you talk about like a lot of Stoic principles, and it's him writing a letter. He's a former Navy SEAL to another SEAL that's in a really bad place, and the chapters are there. Yeah,
I gotta read that book.
It's so good, and yep, they changed the cover on it. Hard-won wisdom for living a better life. And man, it just has so many like good like principles of life and insights. But it's like, it's good for like, if you're struggling in a hard place, man, read that book. Yeah. Right? Because it's almost like, that's why I say I like reading stuff where it's like a blueprint or at least a path that somebody took to get out of the shit. Yeah. Everybody can, like, you know what I mean? Like when people are like, this is how I won, it's just all the good stuff. Yeah. All right, cool. There's stuff to be learned from that for sure. But man, what about the nasty shit? Yeah. What about the hard stuff? Right. Like that's the things that I like to read, but mostly because again, it's like that it also makes you go, well, man, if that person did it, I can do it too. Yeah.
If that made it, if he made it through that, then what I'm dealing with is nothing. Yeah.
If I'm trying to remember which conversation I had about this, but I always go like there are people that are born in worse circumstances, right? And I would say like I was born in Yugoslavia, right? Like socialism. And there's so many people that were born in way worse circumstances than me. I've been around the world. I've been to a lot of places. I mean, I lived in Ukraine when I was playing ball that year. I've been to Africa. I've been to a lot of places. But I've been to Brazil. Like I went to the Triple G favela in Brazil, right. Which is the most dangerous favela, like pretty much in South America. Like, I've been all over. And you go like, I haven't been to India. My friend went to India. He's like, man, the slums of India is like, I don't think there's anything worse, right? And the thing is, you can't pick to be born there, right? Meaning, there's so many people that like have it worse than we do. Yeah. What I like to see is like looking at somebody that came from the worst places and did something. Because what does it do? It gives you an example and it gives you hope, right? But I had a person that, by the way, I don't think they were correct, but they were trying to argue with me. I was like, yeah, but like nobody's ever been in my situation type of thing, right? Which I disagree with, but then I said, hey, but it wouldn't be amazing if you were the example? Like, wouldn't it be amazing if like you were the person that changed that and then you would be the example for everybody like yourself? Isn't that like fucking something worth fighting for? And like made him think about some stuff, and hit me back and was just like, man, I never thought about it that way. But isn't that much more empowering? To go, Because I think that like even if you are, you know, you're in a really shitty situation, that if it's kind of like the hero's journey, right? If you're striving for something, your life is still more enjoyable if you strive and have hope than if you don't. If you have despair and you're a victim, period.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that idea of like, maybe you'll be the first, you know, and I always say, Ed Milet talks about this, be the one, right? Be the first one in your family that breaks out, you know, gets a degree or starts a business or gets out of poverty or, right? Like,
and then you show everybody the blueprint.
Show everybody the blueprint.
So
Like
it goes back to the go-giver.
Absolutely.
Mentality.
And it's like, but man, like, even if there is nobody, you become the example, right? And fight and strive for that, because so many times, and like, because I'm in the space that I'm in, you know, I'm not exaggerating. So I've probably coached over 4,000 people, like between groups, pro teams, you know. I had a count for a while and then I stopped counting at like 3,000 something. But
now the wheel's spinning so fast.
Yeah, but the point is that like I've had so many conversations, right? And many times I have to stop people and say, hey man, like, seems to me like you're fighting for a limitation, you know? And if you want to fight for your limitations, you can keep them. I'm trying to show you something better, you know, and you keep going like, no, I can't. I'm like, whoa, hold up, man. Like, why are you fighting for that?
Right.
That makes no sense to me, right? Because when you look at beliefs, right, you go, so mindset. Everybody says mindset. What is mindset? I'll tell you what mindset is. Mindset is a system of beliefs. So all of your beliefs put together is your mindset, right? And are all your beliefs true? No. Like, you know, there's so many things.
They're true for you.
Correct.
Right.
Like, absolutely. But it's like, is it nature? Is it nurture? A lot of it is nurture, right? You grow up and it's like, I don't know, if you look at, you know, racism, it's like you're around that and like people tell you something, you start believing it. That's your belief. And then your behaviors, right, attached to that belief system. So you have to question your own beliefs, right? And my favorite question, without going to, like, I can geek out about this stuff for a week, but is like, is this belief serving you, right? Like when somebody goes like, oh no, but like, I can't do that. I said, how's that belief serving you?
Yeah.
Well, it's not. Okay. You want to keep that or you want to let go of it? I mean, I know it's like, it's more complicated than that sometimes. And that's why there's, by the way, I've done therapy. I've done, you know, therapy. I've done psilocybin, I've done MDMA therapy, I've done a lot of stuff to, you know, sometimes like trauma from my past and my childhood and all these different things. But you have to be open to, you know, questioning your beliefs if your beliefs are not getting you to where you want to go, right? Because the amount of stuff that, you know, you ask people and they're like, I mean, some people believe the earth is flat.
Yeah.
Shit, you know, how'd you get there? But, or, you know, I take that extreme example, but that probably leads them to other different, you know, behaviors or other beliefs and so on and so forth. So it's like, going back to like the collector role models, I can tell you like right off the bat, like what were some things, the reason why I got so into reading as well was that for $15, I'd buy a book. And that book would have 20, 30, 40 years of wisdom of this really successful person. Maybe it was strategic and tactical. Maybe it was principles, again, and wisdoms of experience. But now, like, I would read the books of the people I aspired to be like and be like, man, their belief system is different than mine. Yeah. Right? And then it slowly starts chipping away and goes, so who's right? But if I want to be like them and have achieved this thing, like, what? Like, then you have to, there's a fight, right? There's a fight here. And then I would have to slowly start. And again, sometimes it takes time, right? Where it's like the more seeds of the other belief I put in my head, and it grows and it grows and grows, and you go like, you know what? I disagree with that. I believe I can do anything. I believe I can do this. I don't believe this thing, right? And the thing is, the moment that your beliefs start changing, your behaviors change, right? Because there's so much research that, you know, they say the whole self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I'll give you a cool question that I ask my clients when it comes to nutrition. So let's say we outline a plan. I'm like, hey, you're gonna have 40 grams of protein with every meal. That's the only thing I want you to focus on. Don't worry about how many calories, this, that. Like, just try to get 30 at least, but try to get 40 with every meal, right? Because they're very under on their protein. And protein is filling. It helps support, obviously, muscle development and maintenance. It's a thermogenic food, nitrogen balance, all that good stuff. And they're like, okay, cool, let's do that. So, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, I call this the magic question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you can do this 90% of the time, right? And if it's a 9 or 10, we go and do that, right? And we say, hey, how are we going to track this, and so on and so forth. If they say 8, I'm basically, I say, what'll get you to a 9 or a 10, right? And if they have something, then we'll try to implement that. If they're 7 or 6, no way. Right. Even an 8, I'm trying to get them to a 9 or a 10. I might make the task so like, you know what? Don't worry about it. How about 2 times a day get 40 grams of protein? Don't worry about lunch, right? Okay, I'm a 9 on that. Great, let's do that. Here's why. Because studies show if a person has belief in being able to do something, the confidence to do it, they will do it. If they don't, they won't try, right? So when
So you gotta
they
get
ask,
them to try.
absolutely. So it's like the belief of whether they can or can't is going to drive their behavior. So a kid, I'm not good at math. Now the thing is, they're not going to practice math because they believe, like it's Carol Dweck, right? Mindset, growth mindset, fixed mindset, right? They believe that they've been given a knowledge of math and that's it. It's fixed.
Yeah.
I can't improve it. So why would I study?
Yeah.
I'm not good at it. So because they don't study, they don't get better at it. I suck at basketball. I just haven't been given that talent.
Right.
Okay, do you think if you practice like 100 hours a month that you get better?
Or even 1 hour.
I don't know.
1 hour a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
30 minutes of dribbling, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you have to break through first for the person, and maybe you got to make it really easy. Like this is all I want you to do is like put your shorts on, your sneakers on, and go for a 10-minute walk every day. Can you do that? Easy, great. Then you have no problem doing it for 2 weeks. And you know, if that person's like, all right, then they go for 10 minutes, they go like, you know what, I'll do 20. Fuck it, I'll go for a run.
Right.
Right? It's better to set less and then they do more. Then they come back and go, I did more than I thought I was gonna do. I do more than what I set out to do. So this is where, you know, the reason why I love this shit, by the way, is because for a long time, I became the geekiest person on training. Like you want to, I still am, but like you want to talk about like, you know, building muscle and vectors of force production and
So instead of Google, we just
I would die. And there's still part of me that's very geeky about that. But what I found was that, you know, whether my client does 8 reps or 6 reps or 12 reps, I mean, for most people, it's not going to make that big of a difference. But if I can keep them coming back so they actually do the 8 reps for the whole year, or they eat the 30 grams of protein with the meal, that's going to change their life, not the 6 or 8 reps, right? That's where it gets granular, right? And so I started understanding about 8 years into my career, like, man, I'm really good at this stuff, but I'm not that good at like getting the people that have a hard time doing things for them to do it. So I had to dive into the psychology, like neurology, like why do we do the things that we do, the habit loops, right? Like deeper reasonings and like how to ask people to and help them trip over their own truth, motivational interviewing. Like I spent years and years and years and years studying that so that I could get folks to do stuff. Because if I help them do it, that's what's going to change their life, right? And sometimes it means helping them question their own beliefs. Not me telling them. You don't get far telling people, hey, Tony, what you believe is wrong. Dude, you'd be like, what? Fuck you. No, it's not, right? Like, but if I ask you some questions and you were like, started answering them, I'm like, yeah, I guess, yeah. And then you figure it out, right? Like a great coach is like, makes the student think they figured it out. So you got to let the ego go, right? And so I started, by the way, like I got a long ways to go, you know, for perfection, but I'm very, very, very driven to become exceptional, like best in the world at that, because I think that's what really helps people, right? Because if you understand that, it's not, the task can be anything. The task can be like save money, eat more protein, strength and training, creating content. The foundation is how do we get people to do things,
right? To get started,
and to be consistent. And so I started studying that because, you know, obviously my what I do expanded because it was like, oh, I'm consulting gym owners, so like I'm trying to help them to follow up better, create systems, get better at sales, not be afraid to spend money on ads, blah blah blah, right? And then I go into other spaces and like now, you know, and I'm going to businesses. I've you know talked to Boeing again. I work with Vigor. I work with these big companies that, you know, Lifetime Fitness, right? Where I come in and it's like I'm talking about behavior change and lifestyle stuff and not training because people maybe don't train yet or don't want to train, but it's like, how can you improve your nutrition and your sleep and your anxiety? But it's all built on this kind of building block of how do we get better? You know what I mean? So that was a lot.
That was a lot. So you talk about tremendous value. I would say you've offered tremendous value. Like there's just a lot of information that
principle number 1.
Yep.
Give value.
So
be a go-giver.
You're living it. You're breathing it. Thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate you
My
having
pleasure,
me.
man.
And, you know,
We can do it again in the future.
Oh,
We got more topics. You know what I mean?
We're gonna do it again.
We got more topics.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, look, it's my pleasure. I love doing this, man. I feel like if I can share things that help people, and if it's, for any show too, by the way, like anybody that's listening, if there's one thing that hits you, like take it and do something with it, right? Because I always say it on my show too, if you can take one thing and apply it, you apply the action, well, then guess what? I mean, you're moving forward, right? Because that bucket one is like what you know.
Yeah.
You got to take it from like, if you listen to this podcast, like, damn, I learned something new. Take that what you know and then go turn it into what you do.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the key. That's the case. And with that, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, hey, where can our listeners find you?
Best spots probably on Instagram. I kind of share all the information to other channels, but at Luka Hocevar, so LukaHocvar. Same thing on YouTube. Just plug in Luka Hocevar, I'll pop up. I have a podcast called the Vigor Life Podcast. It's very I would say it's for everybody, but definitely like very oriented towards coaches and in space. Talk about a lot of things. Got a lot of awesome guests on there. Let's see what else. I think those are kind of like the main things. My gym is vigorgroundfitness.com in downtown Renton in Washington. And from there, like you'll find all types of other stuff. If you're in a fitness industry, I have courses and workshops on lukahocevar.com. But I probably missed stuff, but from there, it leads to everywhere else.
Yeah. Well, hey man, thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning into the show. If you found value in what our guests shared and what we share on the show, please feel free to share with your friends and family. We'd love to see you back here. Thank you again. And you can find us on pretty much every social media channel. You can find us on every social media channel, such as LinkedIn, Zekin, YouTube, Facebook, X, TikTok, to name a few. iTunes and Spotify as well. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Step into the unscripted arena. Subscribe.